Black lion defense. Now, it's very similar to the Pirk, but we're not going to be playing the Pirk. We're actually going to be using a very nice idea to outplay the opponent. So we're going to play knight f6, and yes, it looks like a Pirk, but after moves like knight c3, I like to play immediate pawn to c6. Now, here's the difference between the black lion and the Pirk. First of all, we're going to be delaying or castling for a while because we want to stay very flexible on whether we want to castle on the king side or the queen side. Now, white is going to develop normally. I like to put the queen on c7, and let's say they develop the bishop. I like to play e5. Now, anytime they take, we're just going to take back, and usually these types of position is good for us, where we're able to put our bishop on b4, and we're immediately threatening to win the pawn on e4. And this is why it's not the Pirk, by the way, because in the Pirk, once you take, the bishop would be on g7, and it wouldn't be as active. Doesn't mean that the black line is better than the Pirk, though. That's just the difference. Now, there's also lines when they decide to put their bishop on c4. There's a lot of tactical ideas with this move, pawn b5, and that's the importance of playing pawn to c6. For example, if the bishop goes back, already we could try to play pawn b4, force the opponent knight to move, and then once the knight moves out the way, we win the pawn on e4. Let's say they play this position very normally. Bishop moves. We continue with the idea of playing bishop e7. Let's say they just play h3, trying to prevent the knight from going to g6. We play h6, and they get their king out the center of the board. How I like to do this is, pawn b5 is always going to be a good move, by the way. But let me show you guys the whole idea of the black lion attack. We play knight d7. Let's say they take, we take back. They're trying to get their rooks in the game. And this is when we're going to hit them with pawn to g5. Now, here's the whole idea. We're going to play knight f8. Let me just play a random move. We play knight g6, knight f4, rook g8, pawn g4, and then all the pieces are going to be attacking the opponent's king. In a lot of cases, we just move the bishop to e6, put this rook on d8, and we're fine. Other cases, we castle on the queen side and we attack them on the king side. Why is it called the black lion? I don't know, but it's very aggressive. So if you want to surprise your opponent and play something that they have never seen before, I want you to try out the black lion, but watch this full video. Apply the stuff that I teach and watch your ratings go through the roof. Kicking things off in the 500 region. Today I'm going to be showing you guys the black lion defense. Like, it could get very, very aggressive, and it shares a lot of similarities with the Pirk. So pawn to d3, it's kind of a new move, to be honest. But basically, we're still going to be playing knight to f6. So that's one similarity that it has to the Pirk. Knight c3, we're going to play e5. That's another similarity that it has to the Pirk. And I forgot to tell you guys, like, the guy played pawn to d3 very early. He's blocking out his bishop. Knight to f3, and then we play pawn c6. Also another similarity to the Pirk. So you're going to see moves like pawn c6 in the Pirk. Pawn g3, and now we play bishop e7. That's the first difference. In the Pirk, the pawn goes to g6 and we fianchetto. In this line, we don't necessarily have to fianchetto. So bishop to g2, and I like to go queen to c7, eventually get my knight on d7. And there's a very cool attacking idea that we could start on the opponent's king, where we play h6 g5, knight e7 to f8 to g6, then knight e4. But because he chose to fianchetto his bishop, it's probably going to be a bit different. But first, let's just ensure that the knight goes to d7. I could also just keep my knight on the f8 square for the time being, and then decide what I'm going to do with the rest of my pieces. Being able to play the black lion well, you're going to be able to positionally outplay people because you're already going to know what your plan is. They're still going to try to develop their pieces, and then after a while, they're just not going to know what to do. Bishop to h5, now is a good time to play h6. Is he going to be giving up his bishop for a knight? He did. Let's just take back with the knight. Now I can also go bishop to e6, very, very flexible, and choose whether I want to castle on the queen side. Bro, what's this? Come on, man. 500. That's a bishop, bro. It's crazy. That's crazy, bro. Hey, let's just get the king off the center of the board. Now I'm just gonna attack this guy. H5, H4. Get my queen to G4. He's he's blundering pieces. So this attack is gonna the attack will work, whether it's a good attack or not. Okay, D4. Now we're going for the attack. The plan is to play H4. And if he takes with the knight, I may or may not sacrifice the rook. May or may not. Pawn d5, okay. Let's go with pawn h4. The plan is just to ensure that I'm able to open the H file for the rook. So I don't necessarily have to sacrifice it, but once the H file is open, I'm going to be fine. If he takes on C6, I take back with the pawn. He has no attack on my king. Okay, A4. He's trying to start his own attack. Now my rook gets the file. I want to bring as many pieces in the attack here. Okay, let me just jump in with the knight, just bringing some pieces towards the king. I'm thinking about some ways to get my queen over there, though. Maybe I could go queen b6 and attack his pawn on f2. It also attacks his pawn on b2. So he took. Let's just take back for now. And then the plan is just to play queen b6, attack b2, attack f2. Maybe he's not going to notice that I'm attacking f2 and get mated. Who knows? Guy gave me a free bishop. Pawn a4. That's a nice move. Because now I'm not able to play queen b6. It's like he saw the idea. On to d5. Very strong move. First of all, the rook is on the same line as the opponent's queen, but once he takes, I don't need to immediately take back. Now I'm able to go bishop to c5. So I get to do the same thing, but this time with the bishop. And watch this. Notice how my queen is also applying pressure to his g3 pawn. The only issue is my pawn is in the way. So if I'm able to move my pawn out the way, we grab the pawn, we'll win the game. Knight e4. Nice move. That just makes the whole plan not working. Let's just take though. Let's just take it the knight. And if he takes my bishop, I just take his knight. And I'm still going to be attacking his f pawn. I could have also played rook takes and attack his queen. But because I'm ahead by a piece, like all the trades are going to be benefiting me anyways. Huh? Now let's see how he defends his f pawn. There's rook e2. There's queen e2. Rook e2 was played. Now I'm going to play f5. Launching more pieces towards his king. If I'm able to play f4 and then he takes, then it opens up the g file and his king is going to be way weaker. I mean, that looks like a pawn though. Looks like I blundered a pawn because the knight was attacking e5 twice, but that's fine. I want the trades. Rook takes, bishop g4 hits the queen. I think he's losing here. It's one of those lucky. Like I'm just lucky. I blundered the pawn. I didn't see it, but it's just luck. Because now he has to be super careful. For example, that was not a careful move. Because once I play my next move, there's nothing he could do to prevent a checkmate. Because now, bishop to f3. My rook is threatening to go to h1. He's not able to check my king. He can't take anything. Even if he tries to run with his king, rook to h1 is going to be a mate. So this is where he's more than likely going to resign. Yep. He tries to move the king out the way, but that's just a checkmate. More Black Lion against 600 rated players. Stick around. Opponent is now 600. Let's play some more Black Lion defense. Knight f3, knight f6. Now, yes, it looks like we're playing a Pyrrhic, but we're not going to be playing the Pyrrhic. We're going to be playing pawn c6 here, which still looks like a Pyrrhic, and we're going to be playing queen c7, which still looks like a Pyrrhic. So why is it not going to be a Pyrrhic? The reason why it's not going to be a Pyrrhic is because we're going to be playing e5 very early, which is something that we do in the Pyrrhic. But the whole idea is to put this bishop on e7. In the Pyrrhic, you play g6 and bishop g7. So in the Black Lion, the bishop goes to e7, and there's a very nice attack that we're going to be starting on the opponent's king. So rook to e1 was played, and first let me start with knight d7 before we start the attack. But the whole attack starts with h6. So he plays a3, we play h6. And there's going to be a lot of times in the Black Lion where you're just delaying the castling of your king to start the attack on the opponent's king. Now, keep in mind that you guys are able to see me playing the games where I'm using the Black Lion, but on my Patreon or on the channel memberships, I explain the whole entire theory in a long video as well. So bishop e3, we play knight to f8, and this is the Black Lion attack in play. We're going to be maneuvering the knight all the way to the f4 square. We're also going to be playing pawn to g5, and the attack is going to be brutal. So pawn to d4, we don't need to react to this. Let's just play pawn to g5 and start the attack on the opponent's king. And yes, guys, a move like h3, this actually makes it easier for black. Like, if you notice pawns are coming towards your king, don't push pawns on the side that your king is on. Now, once I play g4, if he takes, all of a sudden my bishop is just pinning the knight to the queen. All of a sudden my rook is going to get the g-file. My knight is also able to go to g6 on h4. Like, this is like typical Black Lion attack. So he takes. Now we take with the pawn. All right, he pulls the knight back. definitely going to be taking on h3. And obviously, he's not going to take back. Like, nobody's going to take and open up the file pointing towards their king. I was expecting pawn to g3. From here, though, I'm going to continue the attack by playing pawn to h5. I'm still trying to do the pawn starve on the king. Knight g6 and bishop g4 is also an idea. And I want you guys to notice how I'm delaying the development. Well, I'm delaying castling my king. But my king is absolutely safe. Okay, knight f3. He puts the knight back on f3. He wants to prevent h4. But now I'm able to develop my bishop and pin that knight. There's rook to d8, which is also coming to attack the queen. Okay, king h2 didn't really do much. Let's get the knight in the game first, because I want to play h4. If he has to take on h4, I want to be able to apply more pressure to his pin knight. Rook to d8 would have been so strong though, because I'm threatening or removing the guard tactic. And if his queen has to go to e2, then it's going to be like a permanent pin on his knight. I think he needs to play bishop e2. Like bishop e2 is going to make a huge difference for him. All right, pawn to b4. Yeah, this is going to be hard for him now. Because now I'm able to go rook d8 hits the queen. There's nowhere for the queen to go because he has to keep the knight guarded. And then from here, I'm going to play h4 and just try to open as many lines as possible. And okay, I'm also not expecting him to take because if he takes, he immediately lose the knight. That's just pp on the pp. But now I'm trying to find all the possible ways to apply pressure to this pin knight. Because once I'm able to apply pressure to the knight, I win the game. Bishop to g5, fair enough. Fair enough. Now I'm going to play knight h7, hit the bishop. Because if he takes my bishop and I take back, queen f6. And that's how we're going to be winning the night. Okay, he took. Let's take back. There is queen to e3 here. Like, queen to e3 is the only move. Because I'm threatening knight g5 and I'm threatening queen f6. So if he doesn't take his queen out of this pin, then it's going to be bad for him. What do I play if queen e3 though? Maybe I should just take, trying to open up this file. He didn't do it. This is where the game ends, guys. So first I'm going to take on d1 because, okay, I'm trading. I'm about to win a whole entire night. And then once he takes, pp on the pp. There is rook to d3 though. There is rook to d3. But do we have to take the knight? Or should we play moves like queen f6 to apply even more pressure to that knight? That's very interesting. I wasn't expecting knight takes. I mean, I'm gonna take the queen, but at least he's able to take on f7, and it's very interesting. But I'm already ahead by 7 points. I'm probably gonna just sack my queen and take his rook. Like he's gonna be down by too many points here. Well, he also decides to save his rook, which means the knight is now hanging. I'm now ahead by 10 points. He took. Knight f5 hits the bishop. Now, bear in mind, he's not able to take my bishop because of mate. So he has to move his bishop. And then I'm going to maybe take on g3, pull the knight back, anything to apply more pressure to his g3 pawn. Okay, so the rook moves over. Let's just trade. That's all we're doing, trading pieces off the board. And then once the knight takes, queen to d2. Okay, knight takes. Let's hit the knight. If the knight moves, then that's just a free pawn. He's also not able to protect the knight. I mean, game is just over now. And he resigns. More lion defense against 700 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 700. Let's play some more black lion defense. We're seeing early knight c3. Let's go knight f6, hit the pawn. Plan is to play e5, knight d7. In some lines, I should be able to like delay how I do the move order. Like, it doesn't matter if you play c6, for example, here. Like, what if I just play pawn to c6 first, and then maybe even play queen to c7, and then play e5? I don't think it should matter a lot, because I don't think the knight being on the d7 square is that important. On d4, no. So there's this idea where in some lines, we take, allow them to take, and then we could put our king on c7. But it will not work since the f7 pawn will be hanging in the end. So let's just get to a regular setup. It's very similar to the pure defense, but it's just that there's two differences. We delay the castling of the king for a good while. We're basically waiting on them to castle first. And two, we do not fianchetto the bishop. In a lot of cases, the bishop goes to e7 or even b4 to pin the knight. Bishop to f4. So he's putting his bishop on the same line as my queen, but my plan was to play e5, bro. And I have two pieces covering the e5 square. The pawn covers the square. The queen is behind the pawn covering the square. So now I get to play e5, but e5 comes with a tempo. And if he takes, now my bishop goes to b4, easily pins the knight, which means I'm already applying pressure to e4. Or we could play the very nice idea with pawn b4, hit the bishop, pawn b5, hit the knight, and then once the knight moves, we take the pawn on e4. Okay, he took. Let's take it the bishop. That's a tempo on the bishop. Bishop went back to e3. And now I'm not gonna just play bishop e7. Like the the b4 square is definitely more important than the e7 square at this point. We usually put the bishop on e7 if the pawn is already on d6. Now he plays knight e2. He thinks he's supporting the knight, but this is not a pin, and this is like pp on the pp. So I'm not gonna add too much of these tactics in the book. I'm probably gonna add a few of them because it is an everyday tactic that happens in all the regular games. The knight is pinned, and I'm basically applying pressure to the pinned knight, and then I grab the pawn. So if you see a tactic like this in your game, submit it to the email and you'll be appearing in my book. So he castles the king, which means my knight on e4 is now under attack. So I'm going to take on c3. I don't care about the trades, by the way, because I'm ahead in material. And knight takes c3 was played. Now, usually it's good to go for the whole knight d7 to f8, h6, g5, knight g6 to f4 plan when they have a pawn on e4. No pawn is not on e4, so now it's a good time to get our king out the center of the board. I still need to finish my development though. My light squared bishop isn't doing anything, and my knight on b8 isn't doing anything. Pawn a3 hits the bishop. Okay, I could take double up the pawns, but then he gets the bishop pair. I mean, I don't see how it helps me to give him that bishop. So let's pull the bishop back to e7. Bishops are better than knights at the end of the day. And let's just finish our development here. Rook e1, guy's getting all his pieces in the game. So here's my plan. I want to develop both of these pieces. If I develop the knight first, I'm blocking out the bishop. So first I'm going to develop the bishop so that way once my knight goes to the d7 square, I'm not blocking out anything. And then after the development of all my minor pieces, then I'm going to start thinking about getting my major pieces in the game. Let's go back to d3. Very interesting move. First of all, to take is a mistake, guys. So we're not going to take on d3 and allow the opponent's queen to just take back on d3. That's going to help him to improve his position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to instead use my rook to pin the opponent's bishop. Now he's not able to take because he's going to lose the queen. And you could see I'm threatening now to take the bishop because if he has to take with the pawn, he's just going to be left with an isolated pawn, which will become a target at the end of the well, maybe in the end game, but let's see. I decided to put his knight on the edge of the board. Guy decided to put his knight on the edge of the board. Maybe I don't know how I'm going to structure the book just yet, but it's going to be in levels, and I think this is going to be like a level one type of pin because there's going to be a section on pins, and if you guys notice, the rook is pinning the bishop, right? And my bishop is already applying pressure to this bishop, but then if I takes, it's just a trade. This is going to be PP on the PP. So if you play that position like this, pawn to e4 is a tactic, and it's worthy of going into the book. Ooh, queen to h5. That's an interesting move. The guy's basically saying, if I take his bishop, he takes my bishop. Now, this tactic is called an in-between move. It's not going to be in the book because, in-between moves are not going to be happening in every game. But it's a tactic to know. So basically, before I take that bishop, I play an in-between move to attack the opponent's queen. Now he has to move away the queen, and then we're going to be taking the bishop, winning the game. Okay, so he moves the queen out the way. Let's just grab the bishop. And okay, bishop f6. I need to finish my development, by the way, but the guy gave me a free piece, so had to take it. Once the pawn takes, though, I'm just going to play something like knight b7, knight e5, centralize my knight, and position should just be winning. Bishop f4. Very interesting. The opponent is trying to pull off a removing the guard tactic, where if I move my queen to random squares, the rook takes my bishop. But there's two ways to do this. There's queen d7, guards the bishop, hit the queen, and there's also the simple bishop to d6, which is helping me to trade some pieces off the board. So let's just go bishop to d6. I have to be a bit careful though, because if after bishop takes, rook takes, then that's going to be a drawback. blunder, which is one of the most important tactic. And if I take with the rook, I'm going to be getting checkmated. So let's just take with the queen. And then eventually I'm going to finish my development. So if he decides to take on d3, I'm not going to take back on d3 just yet. I'm going to first finish my development, maybe try to trade the knights off the board. Rook to d1, not bad. Guy's pinning my pawn. So I'm not able to take because the rook is going to take. But that's fine. There is pawn to d2, hits the rook. Maybe at that point he plays rook to e2. But let's just finish our development here. We have to finish our development. Okay, knight went back to c3. Need to have all my pieces in the game. Let's go knight c5, taking the knight off the edge of the board. And then he made another blunder. I mean, this is a counting blunder, by the way. Well, I have two pieces on the square. He also has two pieces on the square. The issue with the move is once I take the knight, let's say I even take with the knight, is he going to take back with the rook? If he takes back with the rook, then I could have even forked him. So he decides to take with the pawn. Now I'm just ahead by 2 pawns. Let's just pull the knight back, hit the queen. Now I'm just going to trade even more pieces off the board. Maybe rook to e8, trying to trade the rooks off the board. And then eventually his d pawn is going to be dead. Queen f3. Okay, time to start trading. Rook on the file. He's trading. We're going to trade. That's fine. Pawn h3 because he's not trying to get any back rank checkmates. Bishop h5 will not work, by the way, because, wait, did I miss a tactic? Oh, yeah, yeah. We missed a tactic. That would have been a skewer. Oopsies. We definitely missed a tactic there. Let's go knight d5, though. Let's just centralize the knight, start a little attack. Eventually, we're going to try to maybe trade the queens or the rooks off the board. This is why the drawback principle is going to be the first tactic being discussed in my book. You see what just happened? The guy moved the rook from d1 to d2. All of a sudden, the rook no longer guards the back rank. This is what a drawback blunders, which means my rook gets access to the back rank, and that's just checkmate. More black lion defense against 800 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 800. Let's play some more Black Lion defense. It's not a pure defense, by the way, but it's very similar. Knight f3. Let's go knight f6. Tap the pawn on e4. Knight c3 guards the pawn. And now we play knight d7. If I was playing the pure defense, I would have played pawn to g6 and bishop to g7 here. Pawn to d4 was played. And now I'm going to play the move pawn to e5. Now, if they decide to take on e5, then that's the thing. Now the bishop could be developed and we could be starting a lot of attack on their king. If they don't take the pawn, however, then we just put the bishop on e7. We do not castle the king too early because we want to see if they're going to castle on the king side so that way we could start the lion attack. Once he took on e5, let's just take back regular stuff. What's this guy doing, bro? Come on. Come on, bro. Like, my pawn on e5 is clearly guarded. This guy, that's a piece, bro. What's this? Okay, he sacrificed a piece just to trade the queens off the board. That can't be good, bro. It's over now. Now I'm just gonna trade pieces off the board. Bishop to d3. Okay, we're ahead by a piece. What do we do when we're ahead by a piece? We start trading. So let's go bishop to b4. That's 2 trades already that I have in the bag. Bishop to d2. I was about to castle, but we're not able to get castled. Let's finish our development first. But the plan is to take the bishop and then just take the knight. I'm just not going to rush it because if he has to move the bishop again, then he's wasting time. And if he tries to move the knight, I'm still going to trade. So he decides to castle the king. Now we're going to trade. Let's take the bishop. Once he take back, and then my plan was to play king to e7, followed by rook to d8, just bringing all the pieces in the game. And then the pawn on d3 is also going to be unprotected and backward. Pawn a3, do we pull the bishop back because bishops are better than knights? No, we take the knight. We're ahead by an entire piece. We're just trying to convert from here. Bishop takes. Now, the only pieces that we have that is not doing anything are our rooks. So let's just get the rooks in the game. Let's start with rook to d8, attacking the unprotected pawn. If he tries to check my king, then I'm just going to move. And eventually, my plan would be to double up the rooks on the d file. Okay, not bad. He guards the pawn. Let's go rook d7 because now the a rook is not doing anything. And the plan is to double up the rooks on the file, creating what is called a battery. Pawn to f3. And because he plays pawn f3, I think he wants to play d4. But if he had played d4 earlier, he would have lost his pawn. So I'm going to play pawn c4 just to make it a bit hard for him to play d4. He's still able to play d4, but if he does, I'm going to take, and it's going to be opening some easier avenues for me to trade pieces off the board. He still played d4. Let's just grab the pawn. If rook takes, it's a no-brainer. It's helping us to trade. If bishop takes, however, because he has the bishop on the dark square, I'm going to just move my king on the light square, just to be safe. But he took with the rook, so we're just going to trade the pieces off the board. I don't need to rush this trade, though. Let's go rook to d8 and bring more pieces in the game. I want him to take so that way I take back. Again, if he checks, I go back to e8. More trades. We like the trades. Now all our pieces are active. This rook is currently not doing anything, but I still have a plan to trade off these rooks off the board. We spoke about this. Anytime we check, we just pull the king back. I want to put the bishop here and then move the rook down on the back rank. Because if I do that, it forces the rooks off the board, and then I'm just going to have an extra minor piece. I want you guys to notice how I'm stressing. You're ahead in material, just trade the pieces off the board. Okay, rook is on the file. More than likely, he may want to check on c8. But let's continue with our plan. That check doesn't really do much, right? Yeah, let's just go bishop to b3, still trying to trade. If he checks, then I block with the rook. Maybe he's able to go back to c7 at that point, though. But let's see. Let's see what he has here. Okay, he went for the check. Let's go back. He needs to play rook to c7 to hit the pawn and threaten another check. That would be a really strong move. He found it, so we have to prevent that. And then he needs to now take this pawn. And, you could say he gets another pawn. So that was a nice move. Okay, we don't want to give him too many pawns. Let's just move our pawn forward. No, it wouldn't be too bad for him to put his rook back on this open file or attack my pawn. But if he attacks my pawn, the plan is to go bishop c4 and guard it. Okay, he attacks the pawn. Let's defend the pawn. We have to play a few defensive moves here. But the moment I'm able to get the rooks off the board, it's just going to be a very easy win. But for now, it's not an easy win, especially since his rook is on my 7th rank. Okay, random pawn move. Now I'm going to put my rook on the open c file. I think it would have been best for him to put his rook on the open c file. And it's going to be a bit easier for me now to move my knight because there's not going to be any strong rook to e7, especially if I put my knight on, let's say, the c5 square. Okay, guys being very aggressive, marching the pawns forward. If I push he takes, yeah, yeah, let's do that. Pushing to e6 just loses the pawn. And if I take with the knight, he takes with the rook. So I'm going to be forced to take with the pawn. The reason why I'm doing this, though, is I want to be able to get my king in the game. Now, I'm not going to go king to f7 and blunder my knight, by the way. I'm going to first protect my knight, then try to get my king in the game. More pawns coming up the board. The guy's being very aggressive here. Now, if I put the bishop here, I lose this pawn. So I have to be careful. Instead, I'm going to put the bishop here, guarding the knight, guarding this pawn. He attacks my pawn. Now I'm going to go king to... Because the bishop is no longer on this diagonal, I'm also able to get away with king to e7. And I don't have to worry about if I move this bishop, I lose the knight. He moves the pawn again. All right. How do we win this game? We're in the end game, so attacking weak pawns is crucial. Let's attack the weak pawn, putting the rook on the same line as his king. And then once he guards the pawn, notice how the g4 pawn is pinned. And because the g4 pawn is pinned, we're going to be applying pressure to the pinned piece. This is just pp on the pp here. And then the plan is to takes here. Now we win another pawn. I don't want to trade too many pawns off the board, though, because if I trade the last 2 pawns and then he trade his last 3 pawns, I'm going to be ahead by a piece, but it's not going to be the easiest game to win. So he moves the king. This is now the pawn that I'm trying to win. Let's continue to activate our king. Let's go king to d6. The knight guards the pawn. If he sacks his rook, then I'm just winning. If he checks, then I'm activating my king even more, and this pawn is now dead. Once I check him here, I'm also forcing his king back to the 2nd rank. So I like my position here, and we're ahead by a piece. He moves the rook. Now, before I take the free pawn, wait. If I check now, he attacks my rook. So it's best if I take the free pawn now. Let's take the free pawn now. Yeah, let's do that now. Now, if I check, the king comes up, so I'm definitely not going to check. I need to keep the king cut off. Maybe I could even check him here, but I'm going to first centralize my knight. He pulls the rook back. Now we centralize the knight. I have a lot of ideas now. I want to check him here. Okay. Oh, he just wanted to check my king. Let's just move. Let's see what he'll play here. Bishop back to c3. Okay. If I check, the king is just going to move. There's a little fork trick on g4, but my rook is just in the way. If I move my king, I'm going to lose this pawn, so we still have to be very careful. I could check here, but then there's king here. Let's play a waiting move. Let's try rook to a4 just to see if he's going to fall for the fork. If he takes the knight, then I just play king takes and I'm fine. No, he just needs to move either his rook or his king to not get forked here. Okay, he saw it, move his king back, but I also have a very nice idea to convert this into a win. I'm gonna play this weird looking, and this is one of those tactics that I'm planning on putting in my book, guys, where I'm gonna play the move rook to h2, and I'm basically pinning the rook, and I'm setting up a fork. And if you don't know about the book that I'm creating, it's just a tactic book to help you guys, but you should submit the tactics in your games to me. And information is in the description about that book, but now this is just completely winning. We have a pass pawn. Okay, I still have to be careful because here's what I'm seeing. I could roll my pawn up the board and queen. After I roll my pawn up the board and queen, if he manages to trade off this pawn, then I'm going to be forced to checkmate with a knight and a bishop. And do I know how to checkmate with a knight and a bishop? Well, I'm going to have to learn it today. But let's see. Let's continue to just roll the pawn up the board. My bishop guards my pawn, so I'm not afraid of anything happening over there. Bishop moves. Let's continue to roll the pawn up the board. Eventually, I'm going to protect the f2 square and then push the pawn. Okay, he moves the king. Let's first activate my king. I don't have to rush, by the way. Like, if I'm able to... Okay, maybe he wants to push and then I take. So I still have to be a bit careful about what's happening. Let me just get my knight to g4. f2 could be a threat, or maybe I'm just trying to pull my knight back to fork him. So pawn b3, let's go knight e5. The threat is to fork, and the move, he fell for it. He hits the bishop. Now we fork him. King has to move. We grab the bishop. The bishop no longer covers this diagonal, and we're going to be able to just simply, freely queen or pawn. Let's just take here with check first. Okay, now we just roll the pawn up the board. That's a queen with check. And yeah, usually they resign here, but okay, let me play knight c5 so the king doesn't run here. And then I'm planning on checking. Okay, this is now checkmate in two moves, where we check the king. The king is then forced to move to b7, and that's just checkmate. More black lion against 900 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 900. Let's play some more black lion defense. Knight to f3, we play knight f6, hit the pawn, and then now we're going to be going into our setup. Let's start with pawn c6. I have played knight d7 a lot of times in the past, but I kind of found out that I like to just play pawn c6, queen c7, and then pawn e5, as quickly as I possibly can. And it's also something that you can do against anything that they play. Whenever the bishop goes to g5, I think he wants to take and double up my pawns. So let me just play knight to d7 first. Again, it's a part of the setup. The knight is going to go to d7 anyways. A pawn is going to go on e5 anyways. A bishop is going to go on e7. And if he chooses to castle his king on the king side, then we start with the black lion attack. Immediate pawn to d4. It's not a bad move, but because he moves the pawn to d3, then to d4, we could say he's wasting some time. Let me play the move pawn to h6 here, just trying to chase his bishop away from my half of the board. And if he decides to give up a bishop for a knight, that's on him. So he didn't give up the bishop for the knight. He pulls the bishop back to e3. And from here, let's just continue with the regular plan. Let's develop the bishop to e7. We're going to get our king out the center of the board. Maybe pawn b5 followed by pawn b4, depending on what he plays. Who knows? Queen d2. There's a possibility that he wants to attack on, well, or castle on the queen side. So we're going to play this thematic pawn to b5 move where we're threatening to play pawn b4 to attack the knight. Why are we trying to attack the knight? Because it's the only piece that is guarding the pawn on e4. He saw it though, and then he decides to play pawn to a3. To continue with this attack, I'm now going to play pawn to a5. So this, usually the center is solid. Like the center is solid. There are cases where we play d5 to open the center, but most of the stuff that we're going to be doing is going to take place on either the king side or the queen side. He decides to get his king out the center of the board. I'm not able to play the move pawn to b4 because if I play pawn to b4, then after takes, I'm not able to take because of my unprotected rook. There is rook to b8 that I could try. He's just going to play pawn b4 though. Because he castle his king, I'm going to play pawn to g5, and then I'm going to start with the lion attack. This is why it's called a lion, by the way, guys, because they say this looks like a paw. Pawn to d5, another very interesting move from the opponent. Um, all right, guys, it's gonna be a crazy game. I'm trying to attack him. He's trying to attack us. All right. If I take, I think I'm gonna take, maybe I have to take. It allows him to play knight takes b5 and attack my queen. He's gonna be leaving his pawn on e4 unprotected, and I'm not gonna be able to take on e4 because he takes with check. So tricky position. But he decides to take with the knight instead, you know. I think that's an inferior way to do it, but hey, let's just take on d5. Queen takes d5 is still a nice move. He's attacking my unprotected rook and my pawn here, but now I'm going to go bishop b7, attacking the queen, and if he decides to take on b5, I take on e4, and then everything is just fine. Or we notice that the queen and the bishop is on the same line. And because the queen and the bishop is on the same line, aren't I able to hit him with bishop a6? This is called a skewer, by the way. Once he moves the queen out the way, then I just take the bishop. Is there anywhere forcing that he's able to put the queen? Oh my lord. With bishop a6, he puts the queen back on d5, you see? That's why it's good to ask some of those questions. So I guess that tactic is not going to work. So let's just take back on e4. Okay, pawn c3. I want to do the attack, but let me get my king out the center of the board first. There's a lot of stuff that could happen if I leave my king in the center. So let me just get my king out first. He puts his rook on the same line as my queen, but what are the odds of him moving this pawn out the way? I have a very nice move here. I mean, the queen and the pawn is on the same line. It's not a lot, but I could be winning a pawn with rook to b8, forcing the queen out the way, and then I take the pawn. It's best if he puts the queen on c4. Well, I'm not going to say best, but it's a move. Queen a4 is also a move because it hits my bishop, and if I take his pawn, he takes my bishop. I am able to take his bishop though, but seems a bit risky. So I think, okay, he plays queen c4. Because my queen is unprotected, I can't take on b2 just yet. So first I'm going to take on c4, trading the queens off the board. Okay, do I take on b2 or do I hit the bishop first? I'm going to hit the bishop first because the bishop doesn't really have a lot of good squares to move to. If it goes to a2, then I take it the bishop. If it goes to e2, then I take it the bishop. I decided to put the bishop on the b5 square, which is crazy. I mean, he just doesn't want to lose the pawn. So he decides to put the pawn in the way. I think he's trying to attack the unprotected knight, you know, which is the main defender of the pawn on e5. But that's just a blunder, bro. Like, I'm just ahead by a whole bishop here. Pawn to b4, okay. He really don't want to lose the pawn. I'm ahead by a piece here. Bishops are better than knights, but hey, let's just take that knight. It also doubles up his pawn, so it has to be good for me. And then once he takes back, we put the last piece that is not doing anything. We put that piece in the game. Now all my pieces are active. Okay, looks like he's trying to activate his king. Let's just take this pawn though. Maybe if he takes with the c pawn, we're able to trade some more pieces off the board. Who knows? But he didn't. He doesn't want to trade. It's the right thing that he's doing though. Let's put the knight on b6. Eventually I can go knight here, hit the bishop, trade some more pieces off the board. Okay, his rook is active, hitting my pawn, but it's guarded. Let's go knight c4, hit the bishop. Just trying to get the pieces off the board here. King moved out the way. All right, let's not rush. If I takes, he takes, but let's not rush. The bishop literally has nowhere good to go except a7, and that doesn't do anything. I'm going to play f5, preventing his king from going here, but I'm also threatening a fork on f4. He pulls the king back. He saw the fork coming. All right, I'm trying to win the bishop. Like I could take and it's just a trade, but the bishop has nowhere to go, so I'm not in a rush. I'm gonna go rook to a8, preventing the bishop from going to the only good square. I mean, it's also able to go to d2 though. So maybe I need to put my rook on a2. If my rook is on a2 and it prevents the bishop from coming to these squares, then pawn f4. Well, I mean, I'm not gonna say traps the bishop. There's actually this move bishop c5, which is very strong. Well, I mean, not like it's winning, but if I take before he takes back, he could consider playing rook takes. But let's continue with the plan. Let's go rook a2. Let's put the rook on the same line as the king. I'm currently threatening to just win the bishop for free, by the way. Ah, this is why you guys need to be patient. Like, okay, he moves the rook, didn't do anything. Now the bishop that we always wanted to take. We took the bishop, but now it's free. Why? Because the pawn on f2 is pinned, and pinned pieces don't protect. So now the king just has to move out of the way. And He's also going to be losing his f2 pawn because the king is the only defender of the f2 pawn. And once the king moves, we're just going to grab it. And that's why he puts the king on g3, because now if I take, the king guards the pawn, but we're still going to be using removing the guard tactics here. Pawn to f4 check. The king can't move forward, can't go there. King has to go to h2. Then we grab the free pawn. Okay, let's grab the free pawn. And then that's the only score for the king. And now I'm trying to set up some little checkmate, smothered mate ideas. For example, knight to f5. It's not going to be mate, but if I'm able to check, the king can't move. He's going to be forced to sack his rook, and that's just completely winning. Okay, rook g2. Not bad. He's just trying to trade it off. Before I take the rook, even though trading is good, that's just a free pawn. That's another free pawn. I'm trying to bring my pieces in the game, though. Like this bishop, I need to find a way to get it in the game. This rook isn't really doing much. Okay, let's get the knight in the game first. Hit the rook. Rook has to go somewhere. Rook moves. Now I'm going to play d4. It's kind of like I'm trying to create a pass pawn. But once he takes, okay, let's just take back so we create the pass pawn. That's just a check. I'm just going to move the king. The plan was to actually get this rook in the game. So now I'm able to take, maybe get the rook here, attack this pawn. He attacks my pawn, but that's just a free pawn. But why take a free pawn when he puts his rook on d2 and we're able to fork him? Oh, he hits the rook and the knight, but once I take the rook, I protect my rook. And okay, this is now GG's. We're just gonna be going for mate now. He moves his rook, doesn't do much. Let's take the pawn. We're clearly going for checkmate here. He checks. Let's move the king. Now he's able to take with check, but we block with the bishop. And eventually, my pieces are going to just go so close to his king. Like now, I'm putting my rook on the same line as his king. He's checking my king, but he's moving his rooks to squares where he could check the king, but he's only getting like one check. And then I'm able to make a lot of progress. So he pulls the rook back. I'm going to pull my knight back. And this rook is already cutting off the king. So once I'm able to get this rook somewhere around here, then it should be a checkmate. So let's move the rook all the way over to a3, threatening mate. That check blunders the rook, by the way. Is he going to blunder his rook? That's a rook, bro. Knew he would have blundered his rook. And he resigns. More Black Lion against 1,000 rated players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,000. Let's play some more Black Lion defense. Pawn c4, I haven't seen, but luckily this is something that you can play against anything. So let's see what it's going to be. I'm going to play pawn c6, queen c7, knight d7, pawn e5. Anything that they play, we're going to be playing this opening. All right, so knight f3, we go queen c7, knight d7 followed by e5, or just immediate e5. There's some cases where we don't have to play knight d7 here. Bishop e3, let's go with e5 here. And I'm just going to go bishop e7. Maybe get the knight over to g6. That's if he castle on the king side. Then I'm going to get the knight over to g6. Otherwise, I'm going to play h6, bishop e6, and then knight d7. Just a very simple setup. So bishop e2, we go h6, just to ensure that there's nothing able to go to g5 once I put the bishop on e6. And I'm also trying to play pawn to g5. So queen to d2, let's finish our development. Knight d7 is the idea. And there's going to be a lot of cases where I castle on the queen side. There's also going to be some cases where I castle on the king side. But once you play the Black Lion, you want to get a setup where you're like, okay, let me develop first, and then I'll decide where I want to get castled. Pawn d4 is an interesting move. If knight d7, there's pawn d5. If I takes, there's knight takes, hit the bishop. Let's just go knight to d7 here, actually. Let's just continue normally. I'm not afraid of pawn d5 because my bishop is not going to be trapped. If he decides to play h3, then my bishop could be getting trapped and I have to be careful. But if h3, I could also take on d4. And then once they take back with anything, the knight gets access to the e4 pawn. All right. He castles on the queen side. Very interesting. So now we're going to have to start some attack on the queen side. So let's play a6. Eventually, I'm going to play b5, b4, and this plan is going to help me to chase away his knight and then win the pawn on e4. My castling is still very flexible, by the way. Okay, king has moved out of the way. Let's continue with the attack. Now we have two pieces attacking this pawn. And he only has one piece guarding it. And if he decides to take, I'm able to take. My rook gets the file pointing towards his king. Usually I try to castle right at the point where I think, okay, now the attack is going to come in. All right, pawn d5. If I takes, he takes. There's also bishop to g4 here, but let's just take. Because if e takes to hit the bishop, bishop f5 check is very strong. And if c takes, then we already have the c file. So let's just put the bishop on g4 now. Eventually, he's going to play h3. Okay, I was actually thinking about taking on f3, but I could in fact pull my bishop back to g3 because now my bishop is going to be on the same line as his king. Rook to c1. The rook is on the same line as my queen. We do not like this. So the plan from here is to get my queen off the same line as his rook. I'm putting my queen as on the same line as his queen though. But eventually I want to play b4, chase away this knight, win the pawn on e4. That's now my plan. Definitely planning on castling next move. Maybe not next move, but very soon. Okay. What he's trying to do, he's trying to exchange. That's gonna cost him material though. Like he notices that his king is gonna be under attack, so he's trying to exchange. But he just made a drawback mistake. Probably something like this would be added to my book. I'm creating a tactics book, by the way. If you want your tactic to be in that book, submit your tactic to my email. But once I take the queen, if he decides to take with his knight, then we simply take on e2. But if he decides to take with the bishop, then we take on e4. So taking on e2 here is just me winning a pawn. He took with the bishop. Now we take on e4. And just like that, we're ahead by a pawn. The email is in the description, by the way, guys. There's a separate email for the tactic submission. That way it's very easy for me to organize it. Oh, he blundered again. Another very nice tactic that could make the book. All right, guys. What's the tactic here? It's very simple. Now, this tactic would be in the section called removing the guard. Basically, what's happening is my knight is attacking his bishop, which is being guarded by this knight. So what I'm going to do is take the knight, which is the main defender of the bishop, and then once he takes back, we take on d2, and that's a fork. I could also just take his bishop, and then if the knight takes, we take on e2, but let's just take on f3 here. The more pieces that we're able to get off the board, the better it is going to be for us. So he took with the pawn. Now the bishop is just hanging. The king is in check, so the king has to move. And if king c2 hits the knight, I'm able to pull the knight back to c4. So black is just completely winning here. Okay, king hits the knight. All right. Before I move the knight, let me play bishop to g5 and protect the knight because I'm also putting the bishop on the same line as the rook. If h4, then I have bishop f4. It's the same thing. And if he tries to like put his knight on e3, then I just take it because once you're ahead in material, you should trade the pieces off the board. I'm also thinking about now rook to c8, which checks the king, which would be a nice little skewer because again, once you're ahead in material, you trade the pieces off the board. Knight c3. Maybe he wants to play knight to e4, but that's not good. So let's still force him away or force that knight away because if he puts the knight on e4, because my bishop is on the same line as the rook, I'm going to take the knight. The bishop is going to be attacking the rook. And then once he takes back, and that's exactly what he did. And this is just a blunder. So this is called, it's kind of like a discovered attack where we take the knight and the bishop attacks the rook. But once he takes back, we take the rook and we're winning the game. But because we're ahead in material, I want to trade the pieces off the board. So instead of immediately taking the rook, I'm going to go rook to c8 check, forcing the king to move. And then only when the king move, I take with the rook, not the bishop, because the other rook is going to be forced to take, and that's why he resigns. More Black Lion against 1100 rated players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1100, and we're going to be playing some more Black Lion defense. We're going to be using the same exact setup, knight to f6. It looks like a pure defense, but we're not playing the pure defense. This is the Black Lion defense. There's a lot of different ways to go in the structure. We could go with immediate knight d7. We could go pawn c6. So, for example, bishop e3 was played here. Let's just play pawn c6. It comes with a lot of ideas of b5, b4. We've seen immediate early queen to d2, which means he's more than likely trying to castle his king on the queen side. But there's this annoying knight g4 move. Is he prepared for knight g4 though? Because if he's giving us the bishop here this early on in the game, then we should be fine. Okay, he's not. He played bishop to f4. But now we managed to play e5 and it comes with a tempo. Okay, he took with the pawn. The question is, do we take back with the pawn or the knight? Definitely the pawn, because that's more tempo on his bishop. And then he's forced to pull the bishop back. And again, we're not going to play h6, g5, knight f8. We're only going to be doing this if he decides to castle his king on the king side. And it doesn't seem as if he's going to castle his king on the king side. So I'm actually going to use the time to just finish my development. Bishop b4, pinning the queen. And Now he decides to castle his king. Okay, fair enough. I was assuming that he was going to attack my knight, but he didn't. I'm thinking of queen to a5 here to just apply more pressure to this pinned knight. But let's first pull. Oh, if I pull this back, there's takes, but then I'm able to take. So let's pull the knight back to f6. His knight on c3 is pinned, which means I'm currently threatening to take the pawn on e4 for free. And I am going to castle my king because he decided to castle on the queen side. He decided to also take the free pawn on e5. We spoke about this. I'm not able to take because if I take, I'm going to be getting checkmated. But his knight is pinned. So what I'm going to do now is I'm not going to wait. Actually, if I take, there's queen e3. That's a bit risky. Yeah, I'm not ready to do that. Let's go with queen a5 first. Let's apply even more pressure to the knight. Let's attack the pawn on a2. If he takes, I takes, then I'm attacking e4 and a2. But I may want to get my king out the center of the board first. So he took, let's take. Now I'm attacking both e4 and a2. And I'm more than likely going to castle and play bishop e6 before I try to do pawn grabbing. King to b8 was played. Okay. Now if I take, I mean, there's all sorts of pin on the e file. So let's just get the king out the center of the board first. Now we're threatening to take on e4. And the opponent just made the biggest blunder. And he's gonna, I'm not even sure if he's gonna get checked. Well, if he's gonna survive this, I mean, he's attacking my bishop, but we already spoke about the fact that the knight is pinned and it's not guarding e4. And yes, he's attacking my bishop, but offense is the best defense. Once we take this pawn, we're already attacking his queen. We're also attacking his knight, which means this is PP on the PP. There's one, two, three pieces attacking his knight. He's only guarding it twice. So once he moves the queen, we're also going to be taking on c3. We're going to be winning a pawn, and his king is going to be exposed. Now have a look on our king. Safe. Queen to d4. Okay. Saving this pawn. If I take and attack the queen, he's going to take my knight. So I'm going to take on c3 and I'm going to say check because I'm attacking both the king and the rook. So more than likely he's going to take back. And because I have two pieces attacking the pawn on c3, I'm simply going to capture the pawn on c3, attacking the queen. His king is exposed. If he's not careful, he could be getting checkmated right now. So before we even complete a development, he could be getting checkmated. 15 moves into the black lion, he could be getting checkmated. But let's see what he does. Queen back to d3. Just like that, the guy's gotten checkmated. I mean, maybe he's going to sacrifice his queen, or let's see though. But first of all, if I check on b6 and he moves the king, that's mate. So he has to sack his queen on b5. If I take on a3, he has to sack his queen on c3. Now, because I prefer for him to sack his queen and then I take the queen and he doesn't take my bishop, I'm going to check the king on b6. And just like that, this is resignable. Now, again, you guys are seeing how I'm playing the games with the Black Lion, but I have the whole entire Black Lion theory on my Patreon or the channel membership. So the link is in the description if you want to get the Patreon and then see the entire theory, or you could just watch the video on the channel membership. He moves the king, and that's just checkmate. More Black Lion against 1200 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1200. Let's play some more Black Lion defense. On d4, knight f6 hits the pawn, knight c3, and then I like to start with pawn c6. I've noticed that like you're gonna see me playing games with knight d7, but based on those games that I've been playing, I noticed that I don't really need to put the knight on d7 too early. Eventually, it's gonna go on d7, but the quicker I'm able to play d6, c6, queen c7, and e5, it just helps me to get a better position. So knight f3, now I play immediate e5. Also, sometimes they take and I take. I'm able to go bishop b4 and then pin this knight. Well, pin the knight to the king. He plays h3, and because he didn't take, now I'm just gonna go bishop e7. All right, so bishop to d2. Let's play h6, so that way I could put my bishop on the e6 square if I need to do it. And then I'm going to play knight to d7. So one idea in the Black Lion defense is also to delay your castling. Please do not delay your castling for too long, because I have tried delaying the castling for too long and then it backfired in my face. Okay, immediate pawn d5, decent move. It's not a move that we have to react to immediately. He's preventing the bishop from going to e6, so let's just play knight to d7 now. If he takes, I take, and then this is good for me. Now, depending on his next move, this is where we're going to choose if we're planning on castling or not. Or we're going to castle, just when. So if he castles, I'm thinking about g5 and then go with the attack. If not, then I castle and then just play in the center. Right, queen to e2. It's not clear. Is he going to castle on the king side or the queen side? Hmm. Let's play a6. A6 comes with ideas of playing b5. So if his plan is to castle on the queen side, we start the attack this way. If his plan is to castle on the king side, we start the attack this way. No. If he doesn't castle, then I castle. There's also c5, b5, c4. This is a little threat to trap his bishop on a4. He's also preventing me from playing b5. So hey, let's just get the king out the center of the board. And I'm assuming he's not going to get his king out the center of the board. You know, it's kind of like, okay, I'm not going to castle until you castle. That he decided to castle on the opposite side. I guess he's planning on starting attack on my king. I'm going to go full on attacking mode here. Let's just play b5. And just by looking on b5, you guys should know that there's a very strong possibility that I'm going to be losing a pawn here. But I don't care. Why? Because the purpose of a pawn storm is to open lines. So he's also doing his own pawn storm. Pawn b4 hits the knight. There's knight back. I think it's important that we open as many lines for our pieces. So let's take on d5 so that way I could put a rook on the c file. So maybe I could go bishop to b7, hit the pawn, rook c8, threaten some mate on the c file. Who knows? The guy's attack is coming. We have to be careful. Oh, he doesn't even care. This guy's so aggressive. He's just going for the attack. All right, if I take on e4, there's knight takes d5. That's losing. What if I take on e4? He takes my knight. I take his bishop. And then if he takes my pawn, I take his pawn. And if he takes my bishop, I take his queen. Let's do that. So he's playing in between moves. We're playing in between moves. It's going to be a crazy game. If he plays knight takes and I play knight takes, queen takes, and I lose the game immediately because he's threatening checkmate on h7 and he's attacking my unprotected rook. Which means if he plays knight takes, maybe I just have to take on g5, let him get the open file pointing towards my king, but it shouldn't really do too much. All right, so knight takes e4. As we said, we're just going to take back on g5 here. And maybe he needs to play knight takes. Like, again, somebody's attacking somebody here. Someone is attacking someone. My next plan is to play bishop e7, just to ensure that my rooks are connected, and then try to get my rook on the c file. Whose attack is faster, though? That's the million-dollar question. Bishop takes, okay. Now I need to connect my rooks. Let's connect the rooks, apply some pressure to the knight. At least now you could see I'm threatening to take the knight. The issue with my position is I'm trying to attack him on c2, but how am I going to mate? Like, guy's bishop is just untouchable. His attack is also going to take a while. So I'm sure in the next 5 moves, one of us is not going to be careful, and then we're just going to have to be defending. So I have to be careful here. Rook to g1. Very nice move. Putting his rook on the same line as my king. Now if I take, bishop takes, knight takes, bishop takes, I take it the queen. That's not too good. All right, let's just play rook here, knight takes, bishop takes, knight takes, and I'm fine. Let's go rook to e8 just to ensure that my bishop is guarded. So that way, if we have to do a series of trades, then my rook is going to be able to guard my bishop. But I have to be very, very careful here, man. Like, I'm not sure who is attacking who. It's opposite side castle, so it's a crazy game. All right, so we've seen knight takes. Knight takes is fine. If bishop takes, I takes. If bishop h6, I have bishop f8. So let's just play knight takes here. Like, this seems to be a bit safe. I'm not sure if he should have released the tension that quickly. Maybe I'm threatening to play pawn to e4. That looks like a fork in a lot of different cases. So, hey, we both still have to be careful. The good thing is if bishop h6, bishop h6, bishop f8, I have to be careful about sacrifices as well. Like, if he's able to sacrifice on g7 and then immediately pin my bishop, that's going to be strong. Okay, knight h5. Knight is heading to the f5 square. Perfect time to hit him with e4. Isn't that bishop trapped though? e4, takes, the bishop is still trapped. e4, knight here I take, hit the queen. All right, so it's going to be so risky, but it looks like it's a free bishop. And if it's a free bishop, then even if I have to defend, I could say at least I'm defending with an extra bishop. Taking on f6 wasn't the best way to do it. I think knight f5 was a bit more scary, but hey, let's just take. The bishop is still trapped because my rook guards the pawn. Is there any way he could like move his queen to an aggressive square so the bishop could escape. I'm not seeing that. Like queen g4, I just take. The bishop is now doing a good job defending g7 and pointing towards his king. And once we get rid of this bishop, then the attack is going to come in. He sacrificed the rook. All right, so I'm just going to take with the bishop. Take with the bishop, there's knight f5. Ooh, that's actually tricky. I'm actually going to take with the king because I don't want to have any of my pieces and then they're pinned. So take with the king, queen check, king f8, and then I will be running. That's what I'm going to be doing, running. So check king f8, king f8, gone. Bishop is still trapped. Queen g4 doesn't really threaten much. Queen h5 doesn't really threaten much. That's a bishop though. Take the bishop. Okay, I'm definitely taking the bishop because I'm threatening mate. So once I take the bishop, he has to check. Knight check doesn't do anything. If queen check, okay, king e7, I have to be careful. King e7, knight check, king to d7, and then the king is just running away. The good thing is, there's no moves where he could play where he prepares the attack because I'm threatening a checkmate. So after check, I go king up. If he checks here, I go king over. Yes, the bishop is hanging. He can't take it with check. He can't touch it because I'm threatening mate on c2. So he plays c3 to not get mate, but it doesn't stop here. We're sacking now. Okay, this is one of the important tactics that I'm going to be covering in my book. So if there's any tactics you have where you have to sacrifice a piece to expose the opponent's king, please submit that tactic to the email address as well. But once he takes, queen takes lead to mate, which is why he didn't take. He moves the king out the way. But now I'm trying to get my queen to the c2 square. So what am I going to do? I'm going to pull my bishop all the way back to g7. That way, he's not able to check me with the queen. I don't care if he sacked the rook. I don't even care if he plays knight to f5. Why? Because that's just checkmate. More Black Lion against 1300 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1300. We're going to be playing some more Black Lion defense. Now, it looks like the Pirk, but we're not playing the Pirk. So we're going to play the move knight to d7. And the Pirk usually happens when we play g6. We're not going to be playing g6. We're going to be playing e5 and then bishop to e7. So this is basically a setup. The guy already played d3 and then he played d4, which means he's moving the same piece more than once in the opening. We could also say he's making unnecessary pawn moves, wasting time. Let's go bishop to e7 here. And we're just trying to get the regular setup. Once they take on e5, we're always going to be taking back with the e pawn. Bishop to e3 was played. And then another important move that we're going to play is pawn to c6, because pawn to c6 controls the d5 square. So there's no knight going to d5 anymore. And we're also trying to play moves like pawn b5, pawn b4, hit the knight, and then we attack e4. This is especially going to help if he decides to castle on the queen side. So pawn a3 was played very early. And now let's go queen c7. Again, we're just continuing with the setup. We know where to put each of the pieces. And then here we see queen to d2. By seeing the move queen to d2, it's already an indication that he's planning on castling on the queen side. So here's what we're going to do. I'm thinking about playing the annoying knight g4, but he's able to play bishop g5. So first I'm going to play h6. And if he does not play h3, then I hit him with knight g4. And we're already going to be getting the bishop here. Once we get the bishop here, we don't necessarily have to go for the whole g5 idea. We're only going to be playing g5 if he castles on the king side. So if he castles on the queen side, you're more than likely not going to see g5. Okay, immediate bishop to c4 was played. So he's keeping his options open. Like, where is he gonna get castled? I'm not sure. So how am I gonna do this? There is knight g4, there is knight f8, there's pawn g5. I don't want to play pawn to g5 until he commits that he's going to get his king castled. So let's play the move knight to f8 first. We're starting the maneuver of pawn g5, knight g6, knight f4, or even knight to e6, knight f4, or knight e6, knight e4, depending on how he continues. So if we see kingside castle, we play g5 and attack him. If we see queenside castle, then I may go with knight g4. So he's being a bit flexible, and I'm also trying to be a bit flexible. Right, so we've seen pawn to h3. Again, the guy still hasn't commit on where he's planning on castling. So what I'm thinking of here is I'm thinking about bishop e6, and then after the tree, just put my knight on the e6 square. And I can also play rook to d8 to put my rook on the same line as his queen. I'm thinking about pawn b5 to hit the bishop. Once the bishop move, pawn b4, and then after he takes, we take. The knight is going to be pinned, and then I'm going to be threatening to take on e4. That's actually not a bad plan, to be honest. Like, I'm actually going to go with that plan. It's the most aggressive way to play. Okay, bishop went back. Now we play b4, hit the knight. And if he takes, bishop takes, the knight is pinned, which means the pawn on e4 is not under attack. So we still haven't castled our king, but he also hasn't castled his king. And these are the typical maneuver. And I'm probably just going to castle my king on the king side, to be honest, especially if I manage to win this pawn on e4. He didn't take, but he decided to do a drawback mistake. So the knight moved from c3 to e2, which means there's nothing guarding the e4 pawn, which means once we take on e4, we're already winning a pawn. So queen to d3 was played. My knight is now under attack. I'm thinking of just playing bishop to f5, to be honest. Like, what's wrong with putting my bishop on the same line as his queen? I'm also thinking of knight back to c5, hit the queen, hit the bishop. There's a lot of stuff that I could do here. I also like pawn to f5. It guards the knight, and eventually I can play a5 and then bishop a6. Okay, I really like pawn f5. Yeah, let's just go with pawn f5, guard the knight. In some cases, I could play pawn f4, and I really want to just play a5 and bishop a6 to hit the queen though. All right, knight to g3. Knight g3 is interesting. It's actually just a blunder. Is that just well, is it a blunder though? Because the queen and the knight, they're adjacent to each other, which means if I'm able to put a pawn on e4, that would be a fork. And this is a type of tactic that I'm planning on putting in my book. But I want you guys' tactic. So once I take on g3 and then he takes back, what is stopping me from just playing pawn to e4? That's just a fork, bro. And his last try is to play queen c4, thinking, okay, if he takes my knight, which is what he did, I'm going to be able to play queen f7 check, and then I move the king, he checks, and I'm in trouble. But I'm not going to take the knight just yet. I'm going to hit him with bishop e6. You see how important this knight is on f8. Eventually, it could join the game, but I'm still able to hit him with bishop e6, and we're completely winning. Because now once the queen move, we're just going to take the free knight. Also, the g3 pawn is hanging. Bishop to f4. Look at this move. Offense is the best defense. I attack his queen, he attacks back my queen. But this is where calculation becomes important. Let's calculate what happens if I take his queen. If I take his queen, I get 9 points, and if he takes my queen, he gets 9 points. However, at that point, I'm just going to take his bishop, and then that's another 3 points. And his knight is still going to be under attack. And if he takes back my bishop, I take his knight, and we still win a piece. So just taking the queen here is just winning. He's going to take my queen. I'm going to take his bishop. Then I'm going to take his knight. And just like that, we're just ahead by a piece. So from here, I'm just trying to convert this position into a win. My knight on f8 now is not doing anything. So let's just go knight to e6, hit the bishop, force the bishop to move. I could go bishop f6, hit this pawn. So for example, now that he plays this move, I mean, the knight already guards f7. Castling is fine, but I'm going to play king to f7 because we're in the endgame and no need to hide the king in the corner in the endgame. It's very important that we activate our king. Okay, pawn f4. He's trying to solidify his bishop in the center. But because we're ahead in material, the plan is just to trade as many pieces off the board here. So first I'm going to take on a3 because I don't want to do a drawback blunder. And then after he takes back, we go bishop f6. Why bishop f6? Because we're ahead by a piece. And because I'm ahead by a piece, I'm just going to be trading the pieces off the board. Okay, rook joins the game. I'm sure he's trying to check on d7, but let's just take the bishop first because checking on d7 is not going to help. And then once he takes back, we just play rook to d8. We're just trying to trade all the pieces off the board. He castled, don't care. We take the rook and then swing the other rook over to d8 because if I'm able to get the both of the rooks off the board, I'm just going to be playing with an extra knight and it's going to be easier for me to win. He should not trade, which is why he played rook c1 to attack my pawn. But I'm just going to play pawn c5. The knight guards the pawn. My rook has the file. The plan is to play rook to d3, forking both of the pawns, and black is just completely winning here. Pawn b4. Okay, he's trying to trade the pawns, which is correct. The correct thing to do in the endgame. Let's just take, though, and continue to attack his weak pawns by playing rook to d4 first. Rook to d4. I'm trying to get his rook to be on a passive square. Rook to a1 was a nice move. Offense is the best defense. That was nice. Okay, let's pull the rook back to d7 for now. And I'm going to have to take a slower approach to win this endgame. Put the knight in the center, put the king on e6, take the pawn on e4, and then eventually that should win. Okay, he's getting his king in the game. Let's centralize the knight. Plan is to play king to e6, rook to d1. Let's go king to e6, take on d4 next move. All right, so another move that it doesn't do much now because my rook guards the pawn. So let's just take his pawn. This is just going to be a slow grind, but it's winning at the end of the day. He checks. Let's just activate the king. All right, so here's how I'm going to win this. I want you guys to notice that I have 3 pawns versus 2 pawn here. It's a hint of a pawn majority. Whenever you have a pawn majority, you push the pawn majority up the board. If he takes, we takes, pawn to f4, and then I'm going to have a pass pawn here. And with the pass pawn and the extra knight, should be an easy win. He didn't trade, doesn't change anything. We're still going to create the pass pawn. We're still going to push that up the board. Okay, he also didn't take that one, but now I'm able to play rook to c7. The plan is to check the king here. And because the king is not able to move forward, he's going to be forced to step back with the king. And then once the king steps back, then my king is going to be able to move forward. And I'm not going to be able to create some checkmating threats. So let's see where he puts the king. King goes back. Now we put the king here. We're threatening a checkmate, so he has to be careful what he do with his king. So he moves the king over, which means if I check, he's able to escape with his king. I don't want his king escaping, so I'm going to be setting up a mating net where knight here hits the rook. If my knight is able to go to, and this is just the patterns that I know this as being one of the winning patterns, where if you're able to put the knight on g3 and then the rook on g2, it's just going to be a checkmate. So rook to a6 hits the pawn. I have to be careful still. But if I go knight to g3 trying to checkmate him here, he's actually going to check me here. So I'm actually going to play knight e3. Now I'm setting up a more advanced version of this. It's a checkmating 3. If you're able to see the checkmating 3 that I'm trying to set up, then you clearly have some potential. But let's see if he's going to fall for it first. For example, if he pushes his pawn or take my pawn or any weird looking move. Okay, he didn't fall for it. He puts the rook on a3 to pin my knight. So if I check and then he plays king up, I'm not going to be able to check him here. With that being said, though, now I'm able to play here because the king is not able to run anymore. And even if he puts the king here, I'm going to be able to check here, and that's going to be winning. So it basically forced him to pull the rook to the back rank, but now I'm able to start advancing my pass pawn. Pushing the pawn to f2 is going to come next. Okay, he's pushing. If I push, there's king over. So let's do this. Let's check, force the king to move over, so that way I'm able to check and just win the pawn. Or I could play knight g4. Knight g4, he's not able to check my king. I'm also attacking his pawn, and if he moves the pawn, knight f2 is mate. This is also called like a semi-smothered mate as well. He pushes the pawn, but that's just checkmate. More black lion against 1400 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1400. Let's play some more black lion defense. Pawn d4, knight f6, hit the pawn. Knight c3, we play pawn c6. The plan is to play queen c7, knight d7, pawn e5, all of those ideas. Knight f3, we play queen c7. We know the whole setup, by the way. Like, what I'm trying to do is get myself into the setup first. So knight d7, pawn e5. Bishop d3, let's go pawn e5. I only play knight d7 if I have to do it. Like, knight d7 could be a move. I'm going to be explaining the full Black Lion theory on my Patreon or on the channel membership. So you're going to really see all the exact moves that I recommended, like when I'm analyzing these games and saying, okay, this is what you should play. But for now, I'm planning on playing moves like Bishop b4. Usually they don't castle early though, which is crazy. Bishop e3. The plan here is now to play Bishop e6. But if Bishop e6, there's Knight g4. So I'm going to play the move Pawn h6, preventing Knight g4. I mean, I'm also able to play the same knight move and attack his bishop. So he needs to play h3. In fact, if they don't play h3, we're able to play Knight g4 and attack the bishop. And because the bishop has no squares to move to, I'm just going to take the bishop. We're going to have the bishop here, and we should be able to win a nice game. Okay, we've seen queenside castles. There's a specific way that we want to attack the opponent on the queen side. I'm not going to take this bishop until he forces me to do it. So for now, let me finish my development. Bishop e6, knight d7. There is bishop b4. I like bishop b4 because it forces him to play a6. And then after he plays a6, we're able to pull the bishop back and then play b5 followed by b4. Now that he plays h3, that's when we're going to take on e3. And then after the queen takes, all of a sudden my bishop could go to c5 and hit the queen. Let's go knight d7. And then bishop c5 hitting the queen is coming next. Knight went back. Now I'm able to develop my bishop. That's a tempo on the queen, by the way. Queen moves out the way. I mean, I could decide to castle my king. I could delay my castling for a bit, but okay, queen goes back. I don't have to castle just yet. Let's play pawn b5. I'm going to start my attack. And I'm also making it hard for him to put any piece on the c4 square. So king b1, let's get our king out the center of the board here. And then we're going to be attacking him on the queen side. On g4, okay, he's also trying to attack me. So it's going to be a crazy game. If I play pawn to b4, hit the knight gets the a4 square. So what I like to do in these positions is to play a5, and then a4, and then I play b4. And this is exactly not how you respond to pawn storms. I have a student today who asked me, how do I respond to the opponent's pawn storms? It makes me nervous. This is not how you do it. Do not push pawns on the side that your king is on, unless you have to. Because he plays a3 thinking it prevents b4. No, bro. It makes b4 easier because now your knight is under attack. And if you take stakes, it opens up this file on your king. So whenever you see the pawns launching at your king, let them launch an attack on the other side. Only react to it if you have to. So the knight went back to a2, and I'm just going to take on a3, first and foremost, opening this b file for my rook. He plays b3, and because I'm trying to just open up everything, I'm not going to play a4. Because now if he takes, there's rook b8. I can always take back. His knight could be captured. There's a lot of stuff happening now. His king is just weak. Bishop c4, not bad. Let's just take here. Continue to open up some more lines. I think knight b6 wouldn't be too bad here. Okay, he took with the pawn. That's a bit weakening. That's a bit weakening. Because now my bishop is just very strong and centralized on d4. And if he takes on e6 thinking he's doubling up my pawns, he is, but then my rook gets the open file. Okay, knight f3, hits the bishop. I like pawn c5. I'm going to lose the bishop, so let's just protect the bishop. And if he chooses to take, I take, and then I have a pass pawn, and then my knight could get access to the c5 square. And now my rook it's going to be active on the file, but I'm not going to be winning the f pawn. So I'm more than likely going to be putting my rook on the b file. Ooh, the guy says, hey, I'm going for my own attack. He puts the rook on the same line as my queen, and he's going to be playing moves like g5. So still need to be a bit careful here. How do I do this? Okay, I have a little plan. Queen b7 is a very nice idea. e4 and g3 is weak. If I take and he decides to take with the queen, then I'm able to take a free pawn, hit the king, hit the knight. If he takes, then my rook takes, and then I hit the knight, and then his pawn on b3 is going to be unprotected. So I really like this move because it comes with a threat. And whenever someone is attacking you and you're attacking them, the player who's going to win is the player whose moves comes with threat. Yep. So he's going for his attack. But the plan was to take this bishop. He's not able to take with the pawn due to the pin. And I'm basically forcing him to make a drawback mistake because now I take on e4 with check, hitting the king, hitting the unprotected knight. King now has to go to c1. I mean, blocking with the queen, I'm still going to take the knight. Anything he does, I'm going to take the knight. So he moves the king over. I could check. Ooh, oh no, that doesn't work. I thought it was a discovered attack. But let's say I check. The king goes to d2. Nah, let's just take. If he takes, then, oh my lord. I was about to say if he takes, I play g6, but my f-pawn is pinned, and pinned pieces don't protect. So his rook is going to take with check, and I'm going to be in trouble. All right, he didn't even take the pawn. He pulls the queen back. Okay, do I want to trade some pieces off the board? For example, check, queen block. Yeah, let's do that. I'm just ahead by a piece. If he moves the king, then the pawn is free. So this is basically a fork. And if queen d2, I just trade. So he moves the queen. That means the pawn is free. I'm also attacking his f2 pawn twice. I was expecting rook move, but okay, I have two pieces attacking f2. Let's just take on f2. He has to trade queens because if he moves his queen away, he could be getting checkmated. I'm ahead by 6-7 points here. Like, can't lose or make any mistake. If I make a mistake and blunder a rook, I'm still going to be ahead by a point. He moves the king, we still push the pawn because the king and the knight is on the same line. And if he decides to take the pawn, rook to b2 checks the king and picks up the pawn. So maybe he has to play rook here, but then I'm just going to trade the pieces off the board. Knight back to c1. I could just roll my pass pawn up the board. Ooh, he pushes the pawn. Okay. Let's play f6 first. Hit the rook. I want to play knight c5, and then if he takes, I check. But if knight c5, he takes here. He attacks the bishop. Let's put the bishop to safety. And then I want to play knight c5. He moves the rook. Okay, if knight c5, he takes on f6. Let's be patient. Let's not rush the end game. Let's play king f7. Now that that moves didn't do anything, now we play knight c5. This is not me hoping that he takes. I know that if he takes, he's going to lose his rook, but it's also activating my knight. Like knight d3, I'm going to take on b4, and this is winning. He also has 30 seconds on his clock. He moves the pawn. Let's move my knight forward. The threat is just to take the free pawn. If he moves the pawn, then I'm just going to take it. Like, it's going to take him a while to put a lot of attack on my f6 pawn. Okay, he's trying to guard the pawn. Okay, let's just attack this pawn. He also has no time on the clock. With this being said, let's just sack the rook. Wait, he pre-moved again. Let's sack the rook again. We're going to be playing more Black Lion against 1500 rated players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1500. Let's play some more Black Lion defense. And, we're trying to be a bit flexible with the move order because, I kind of want to show you guys that you don't necessarily have to play all of the same thing. So you could start with knight f6, knight d7. You could start with knight f6, pawn c6. You could even play d6, c6, then knight f6. What is important is the setup. Do you know what the setup is? And once you know what the setup is, it becomes easy for you to put your pieces in that setup. So for example, pawn c6. I've pawn c6 followed by queen c7 has kind of been my favorite setup because I kind of find out that, even though the knight is usually going to d7 and then back to f8 and back to g6, you don't necessarily have to rush to develop this knight. Like, get the pawn on e5 first. Maybe in some cases they allow you to play bishop b4. So bishop to d3, we play pawn e5. And the reason why we're trying to delay castling or king in the Black Lion is because of this line with knight d7 to f8, h6 g5, knight g6, knight f4, and we get some crazy attacks. Pawn to d5 is interesting. It's basically closing the position. That's definitely interesting. Now, I'm not going to take because that doesn't give me anything. Usually, pawn c5 is nice because it just closes the position. Knight b5 may be a bit annoying. Let's just go bishop e7. Bishop e7 is one of those moves. I know that my bishop is going to e7 because it's not the Pirk, so we're not going to fianchetto. He plays bishop to g5, and now I'm going to play knight to d7. And if he ever takes, I'm going to take with the b pawn, so that way my rook gets the file, my pawn covers the c5 square, my bishop gets to go to a6 sometime in the future. Queen to d2 was played. So there's a possibility that he's going to be castling his king on the queen side. If that happens, then we're going to start launching the pawns forward. For now, let's just play pawn to h6. We know how we feel about opponent's pieces on our half of the board. He pulls the bishop back, and there is pawn g5 followed by knight to f8 here. By the way, let's start with knight to f8, just to keep the move order flexible. And, because maybe if he castles on the queen side, I'm going to castle on the king side. I want him to castle on the king side. Then we launch the Black Lion attack on him. And let's say he castle. What do we play if he castles here? Okay, he decided to take on c6. Always going to take back with the pawn because we don't want any knight getting access to the d5 square. Now it's guaranteed that he's not going to castle on the queen side because my rook already has access to this b file, which means I could start the Black Lion attack right now. He pulls the knight back to e2. First thing I'm going to do is to play rook to b8. Putting my rook on the open file, he plays pawn to b3, and then we start the attack with pawn to g5. The reason why they call it a black lion, I don't know why they say the lion is black, but they say that there's a paw. Like this, it creates a paw. But I guess it's because we're playing with the black pieces. Let's go with knight g6 though. Again, castling, very risky. There's too many pieces in the attack. Castling on the queen side is also risky. So maybe he has to keep his king in the center of the board. I mean, I'm also keeping my king in the center. So maybe he thinks he's being very flexible. Pawn to h3 because he doesn't want me to play pawn to g4. Let's continue with our development. Bishop goes to e6. All our minor pieces are now developed. Knight f4, pawn h5, pawn h4, rook g8. Let's see. Knight moves over to b3. Okay, there's definitely some tactical ideas that I'm seeing now. Already I'm seeing pawn to d5 because, okay, yes, I'm going to be leaving e5 unprotected. Well, not unprotected, but a bit soft, but it's fine. So pawn to d5 also comes with some ideas of playing bishop b4. And then you could say I'm punishing him for keeping his king in the center. The thing is though, after d5 takes, how afraid am I? How afraid am I of this move, knight b5? Maybe I'm afraid of it. Yeah, maybe we're not going to play that move as yet. Let's just continue with the black lion attack then. Knight to f4, attacking his pawn on g2. And I guess it can happen if they decide not to castle their king. Anytime the bishop takes, we're going to take with the g pawn because we want to be able to put our rook on this g file. He plays pawn g3. Let's just take on g3. Now, that's definitely a weak pawn. There is already rook to g8 that I could play to attack the pawn. I like the idea of playing knight h5, and if pawn g4, my knight gets the f4 square. I also like the idea of playing h5, so pawn g4 is not possible. But I like knight h5 the most. If we push, there's knight f5. There is knight g3, but my knight is going to be getting trapped. He defends with the queen. Fair enough. But look what happens once he defends with the queen. Queen no longer guards the knight, which means this diagonal becomes an open diagonal. We're going to punish him for it now by playing the move queen to a5, pinning that knight to the king. Is he going to put the queen back on d2 to guard the knight? Because if he does that, it's another drawback mistake because then he's leaving this unprotected. Is he going to play king to d2? King to b, that cannot be it though. Okay, we're pinning the knight. We're trying to apply more pressure to the pinned knight. I really like this position. Look on this position and tell me what move you'd play. These are tactics that happens every day. This tactic, this deserves to go in the book. Basically, what's happening here is because we're pinning the knight, we're looking for ways to apply more pressure to the pinned knight. And that's where the move pawn to d5 comes in. We're threatening PP on the PP two ways here. Not only are we threatening to play pawn to d4 to apply more pressure to the knight, we're also threatening to play bishop to b4 to apply more pressure to the knight. So maybe he's going to play bishop b4 thinking, okay, once he's not able to play bishop b4, but then I'm going to hit him with pawn to d4. So this is just a nice tactic. Okay, knight takes e5 was played. He's threatening a fork here, which I should not be afraid of that fork. Wait, can I sack the queen? And then check. Takes, check, king up. Doesn't work though. Dang, it doesn't work. Pawn push. He's able to go back with the king. It doesn't work. Okay, so the whole plan was to do a pin. So it still worked, but we're basically going to use the pin and turn it into a removing the guard tactic. Pawn d4 should still be winning. Bishop b4 should still be winning. But I like the idea of bishop to g5 because it immediately attacks the king. It's a removing the guard tactic. The king is the only defender of the knight. The queen attacks the knight. Bishop to g5 checks the king. It forces the king to move away, and then we take the unprotected knight. The good thing is, depending on where he puts his king, we could now be seeing a tactic called a fork, where once the king moves out the way, which that was the right place to put the king. If he had put the king back, then I would be able to hit him with queen c3, which hits the knight and the rook. But this is not a fork because he is able to move away the knight, and then once he moves the knight, I'm not going to be able to take the rook. But we are already ahead by a piece from here. Queen to f3, interesting move. Attacking my unprotected knight, leaving his knight unprotected. Let's say I check. King f1. Nah. Yeah, I'm just gonna take the knight. It's gonna be a trade. And who don't want to trade? I'm the one who's ahead in material. I take his knight, he takes my knight. This is also left unprotected. That's also a pawn because I have two pieces attacking this pawn. He only has one defender. So once I take on e5, that's also a pawn, bro. Bishop a6 didn't really do much, to be honest. Let's just bring more pieces in the game. Think he wants to play. I think he wants to play h5 though, but let's just bring more pieces in the game. Rook to d2 is an idea. Taking here is an idea. Rook to d1, okay, he's getting his rook in the game. Is it a good time to just take here now? And then he takes with check. To take is a mistake. Let's play rook to d5. And if he decides to take, then my pawn take, and we get a very nice big center. So that's what he did. Now we take, we have a nice center. We can start rolling these pawns up the board. He puts his rook back on the open file. And okay, this has to be the perfect time to take this free pawn. I mean, the checks doesn't do anything. Pawn h4 loses the queen. He's not attacking anything here. This is just GG's. I have I have a video explaining the full Black Lion theory, by the way. It's on my Patreon or the channel membership section. Pawn c5, what I'm noticing here is the queen and the king is on the same diagonal. Because the queen and the king is on the same diagonal, I'm going to take on h3. And if he's not, well, everything is on the same diagonal, so he's in trouble here. He's fucked. The queen is also trapped. Like the queen has nowhere to go. He decided to take with his rook, but now we have a tactic called a fork. We play bishop to g4, checks the king, hit the queen. Maybe I had a checkmate there. I'm sure there was some form of checkmate there. But okay, this is just completely winning. The guy has no queens on the board. This is GG's. Okay, let's see how good my conversion skill is. I'm trying to set up some checkmate here now. King goes back. Hmm. If a bishop is here, that's mate. So let's play bishop back to f6. If our bishop is on c3, then the king is not going to have anywhere to go. So that's going to be a mate. He checks. It's only a check though. Let's just move the king out the way. And then once he moves the bishop, we check here. It's not mate because his rook is able to block. But now we check. Okay, we don't necessarily have to check. This is PP on the PP. The next move is going to be a checkmate, regardless of what he does. He moves the bishop, hits the queen, but it's just a checkmate. More Black Lion against 1,600 players. Stick around. Your opponent is now 1,600. Let's play some more Black Lion defense. Knight f3, knight f6 hits the pawn. Pawn moves, okay. Let's continue with the plan. For this one, I'm choosing to play e5 a bit earlier, but it doesn't really matter. Like, pawn c6 is still going to come. Queen c7 is still going to come. And then he plays d4. So, bro, that's a pawn, though. The pawn was covering e4. Now it's no longer covering e4. I think he's playing a bit too fast. Because how is this not a free pawn? That's just a pawn. My pawn on e5 is being guarded twice. And his bishop is now under attack. All right, bishop went back to h4. So he basically just moves the bishop out the way. And I'm just going to continue with my development here, to be honest. Like bishop e7, let's just finish our development. And if he moves his bishop once again, that's going to be good for me. And I'm going to put my queen on the same line as his king. Okay, bishop moves. Tempo on my knight. I think I need to take to put his knight on the edge of the board. And then after the knight takes, go queen e7, hit the knight. And if he takes, I take, hit the bishop. And then what if the knight just goes back? If the knight goes back, we take and then castle. I mean, that's one way to do it. I mean, I don't have to do all of that, to be honest. Let me just pull the knight back. I mean, in some cases, I'm going to be threatening a fork on e4. I could simply castle my king whenever. I could just go bishop e6, knight d7. Okay, queen e2. He's attacking e5 three times. I'm guarding twice, so I need to do something about that. But what I'm going to do about it is develop my bishop and pin his knight. If h3, because I'm ahead by a pawn, I'm going to trade. And it's taking his queen from attacking my pawn. Now we go knight d7, finishing our development. Now we have the option of deciding where exactly am I going to castle my king. Knight d2, okay, maybe he wants to castle on the queen side. Let's just play h6 here. Very important move in the Black Lion. It allows us to play g4. All right, he castles. Now g4, bishop back, and then I could try the little attacking idea, but I think it's too slow. I think it's way, way too slow. Let me just play d5. d5 comes with the threat of playing e4, which would be a fork. But if he decides to take on e5, I play knight e5, and that's also a fork. So maybe he pulls his bishop back to g3 to pin my pawn, but at that point I go bishop d6, and then I'm still going to be threatening to play e4. It's a bit tricky though, because g3, bishop d6, takes, hit the queen, and then he's going to want to pin. At that point, I'm just going to run. And then after takes, I'm going to be fine. Okay, bishop decided to go back. Now it's easier for me to play. Like I have this very nice pawn structure. The queen has to move out the way. My bishop could also go to d6, so that way he's not able to come back and attack my queen. And then I could just castle. Like I have a very nice position here. Okay, queen moves over. We hit him with bishop d6. Still haven't castled. There's some threats of bishop f4 hit the queen. Queen has to move. There's also threats of playing g5, and then he loses a pawn. I think this is exactly where he's going to lose the pawn. So first of all, if I play g5 now, the bishop goes back, the queen guards the g3 square. That's why I'm going to start with bishop f4, forcing the queen to move first. And then once he pulls the queen back, that's when I hit him with g5. Bishop is then going to be forced to move back. Then we take, and that's another pawn, bro. No, we're capturing all the pawns. Maybe we don't want to castle on the king side anymore. Queen side should be safe, but after c5 and then takes, it opens up the file for his rook. So maybe it still has some slight risk factor to it, but we're ahead by 2 pawns. So all trades are good from here. Knight f3. He's boasting. He's like, okay, let me just put my knight on f3 because now you can't take. But what's going to happen once I just castle my king? Like just get my king out the center of the board. Are you going to just pull the knight back to d2? Because if you put the knight on e5, I have control over the e5 square twice. So you're just wasting time with this knight move. And then my plan is now to play g4. I'm now going to open up the g file pointing towards his king, swing my rook over to the g file. Okay, good time to pull his knight to h2, preventing g4. So if I push, okay, I think I should still push. Push knight takes, takes, queen takes, takes, pawn takes, and then I play rook g8, hit the pawn, but then he's able to pull the bishop back to d1. With that being said, I'm going to start by playing rook to g8, so that way if I push and he takes, we just trade everything and the position is going to be better for me. a4 didn't really do much. Let's play g4. That's the initial plan. And yeah, this is a very similar or this is the whole idea of the black lion attack. I mean, we're just attacking the opponent on the king side, especially when he plays this move pawn h3. It allows us to play g4 and use his pawn as a hook. Pawn a4, I mean, he's trying to do his attack, but it's going to be too slow. Like the time in which it's going to take him to push the pawn here, then here, he's already going to be mated. Let's just take on g4. If he takes with the knight, we take with the rook, or we could also take with the queen. I mean, if we're ahead by 2 pawns, it should not hurt going into an endgame. But taking with the rook is very strong because the plan is to triple up on the file. I can also play rook h4, queen to h2. So he's also likely to be getting checkmated here as well. Okay, this is what I wanted. What if I play rook h4? No. Check, king over, check, pick up the rook. And that's if he takes here. There is rook g1, rook f2, rook h4. How does he stop this? Yo, that's actually what I'm going to do. Let's first triple up on the file, just to ensure that all my pieces are doing something. Once he goes to f2, now we play rook h2. And I talk about this a lot. Like when it comes to attacking the opponent's king, we want to attack the pawns and the squares around the opponent's king. And that's the reason why h2 is now a weakness. And then h1 is also a weakness. If he tries to run the king, that's mate. If he moves his queen, I check king move, grab the rook. Like, yeah, this is now GG's. All right, so he took. I already calculated this though. I'm gonna check on h2. Oh, the king. Oh well, if the king goes here, then I take. That's GG's. So we check on h2. King moves to f1. We check on h1. King moves to f2, and that's just a rook. And it should be game over if we're winning a rook. So we check. King will never be able to go here, but that's where the guy decided to go. Now the queen no longer guards g2. Rook takes g2 and we win an entire queen. King moves out the way and okay, this is game because that's just checkmate. More black lion against 1700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1700. Let's play some more black lion defense. So bishop to c4, immediate bishop c4 is interesting. Let's just attack the pawn on e4. And then after pawn d3, we play pawn c6. Again, I'm just trying to get my queen to c7, the knight to d7, the pawn on e5. So he develops his knight. Knight to d7. I play knight to d7 sometimes, to be honest. Personally, I prefer to play queen c7 and then just play knight d7 when I have to. But it's kind of a matter of preference. But personally, I like queen c7. So pawn f4, let's just play pawn e5. I'm not trying to allow the opponent to get too much space. If pawn to f5, that would be interesting. I think he's trying to play a Vienna type of setup against my black lion, which is interesting. Yup. Okay, I think I'm going to trick him. Look at this. Pawn d5 takes, takes, knight takes, takes, bishop takes. And if he plays bishop takes, queen a5 wins the bishop. So let's go with that. So with that being said, after takes takes, he must play bishop takes first. And then after I takes, he needs to play knight takes. And, then his position is going to be fine. But his pawn on f5 is going to be very weak. Okay, so he took the pawn. Let's just take back, forcing him to give up the bishop here, but he didn't. He blundered the game away. Let's just take on d5. And just like that, 9 moves playing the black lion, our opponent blundered his bishop. So now he has to block with something, and then we're just going to take the bishop. And then this is basically GG's. Okay, he blocks with the bishop. Let's just take the free bishop. And then from here, it's just going to be smooth sailing. Knight f3. Let's just develop our bishop, ensuring that the king is not able to get castled. Queen e2. And then I'm going to castle my king safely. The funny thing is, if he tried to castle on the queen side, he's just going to be blundering his pawn on h2. So he plays a3. I think he's trying to castle, but he doesn't want to blunder the pawn. Let's just go rook to e8 here. Let's put the rook on the same line as the queen. So I'm threatening to play e4. And if he takes, I take, and his queen is going to be pinned. So maybe he's going to run his king out the center of the board now. But if he runs his king out the center of the board, then he's no longer going to be covering his a2 square. And then I'm going to play queen a2. So he plays pawn c4. All right, where do we put this queen? Let's just pull the queen back to d6. If pawn b4, then I play bishop d4. Now his rook is under attack, and I don't care if he takes on d4. I can't take with the knight, by the way, because I lose the rook, but taking with the queen just hits the unprotected rook, and I'm the one who is ahead by a piece, so I want to trade the pieces off the board. I'm thinking of playing just e4 next move, though. And if bishop e3, I just take the free pawn. And, if he takes, I take, his queen is going to be pinned, and this is just winning for black. So he plays rook to c8. We play e4, and if the bishop goes to either c3 or e3, he loses the d3 pawn. He's obviously not going to take, though, because he would lose his queen. All right, bishop c3. Let's just grab the free pawn, and now I'm just ahead by whole entire piece. So the plan from here is just to finish my development, trade some pieces off the board. I'm currently attacking this unprotected pawn, and he's also trading, which is helping me. King takes, that's just a free pawn, and I'm not going to lose the game being ahead by an entire piece. So from here, I'm just looking to convert. He's hitting the bishop. Don't care. Let's give a check on the king. The king is not able to attack my rook because my rook is covering this file. So once the king moves, do we check again? No, we check with this rook. The king is now not able to step forward, so the king had to step back to a1, and that's just a checkmate. More Black Lion against 1800 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1800. Let's play some more Black Lion defense. Let's go knight f6. Now we're going to be playing the preferred setup. Pawn c6, queen c7. I prefer this over knight d7 too early, even though we could still go knight d7 and e5. Okay, bishop to f4, which means if e5, he's going to win a pawn. But now I'm going to play knight d7. And if he allows me to easily play e5, which he did, I basically just won a free tempo on his bishop. So after takes, maybe he could pull his bishop back on h2 and be like, hey, my bishop is on the same line as your queen. That's definitely an argument that he could have. So he pulls the bishop back. Okay, and let's just start by playing. Nah, shouldn't start by playing h6. Need to play something a bit more principled, like bishop c5. Let's go with bishop c5, developing the bishop. Then h6, then I'll probably castle. Or if he castles before that, then I'll go with the attack. So knight c3. The good thing about having a pawn on c6 is it limits the amount of forward moves that his knight on c3 could go to. Now let's go pawn to h6. Knight back to d2. Knight h5 is now not possible. But knight f8 is now possible. And if he plays knight to c4 hits the pawn, I play knight g6 guards the pawn. And eventually I'm going to be able to play b5 and hit the knight. Or I could go bishop e6 and then rook d8. Or I could go bishop to e6 and castle. So knight b3 hits the bishop. We have to put the bishop somewhere. Usually if there's not somewhere certain where you think the bishop is active, just keep it on e7 for the time being. I mean, d6 was also fine there, but my queen is already guarding this. The plan from here is to go bishop e6, maybe rook to d8, and then I'll decide if I'm going to castle. So he decides to castle his king early. So this may be one of those cases where I don't castle. But pawn to f4 is an idea that he wants. So let's just play g5 to ensure that there's no f4. And knight to g6 and knight to f4 is now the very simple idea. There's also bishop to e6, rook to d8 here, which is nice. Okay, queen moves to e2 and knight g6. This is now the Black Lion attack. Knight f4, once he takes, the rook gets the file, and then all the pieces joins the attack. I may go bishop e6 and queenside castle, just to be sure. I do not want to rush this attack. Like, one way how you guys could lose in the Black Lion is if As soon as you get the attack, you just rush it and you mess up the position. Just keep in mind that it's going to be a hard position for white to play. So you will eventually outplay them. Rook to d8, okay, he's putting his rook on the file. There is bishop e6, but bishop c4 makes it a bit easier for him. There's nothing he could do to prevent knight f4, so I'm going to play pawn h5. I'm trying to start some pawn storm on this king. I want to play h4 to hit the bishop and then g4. And if he takes and I takes, I open the g file and then I could castle on the queen side. Like, I think if I castle on the queen side here, my king is going to be very safe. Yo, that was a very interesting move. I wasn't expecting that. Like, I thought the knight was just not doing anything, but now his knight is able to go to d4. I guess it's planning on moving to east, the f5 square. If it goes to f5, then I'm going to be forced to take. So maybe I should play knight f4 right now. And after takes, knight f5, I take, and then the queen is going to be attacking this, but it's going to be guarded. And then I'm just going to run my king out the center of the board. And I'm still going to be able to have attack on his king. So let's do that. I just wanted to move my light squared bishop when it's doing something. And now it's going to be doing something. So I'm expecting him to give up the bishop. I take, and because the knight is going to be under attack, knight f5. And then once I takes and he takes, we run. Okay, he took. Let's take back. Knight f5, obvious move. And then the plan is to take the knight and get the king out the center of the board. So my king is now safe. I mean, his king is not in any huge danger, to be honest, but I have an open file pointing towards his king, so he needs to be careful. This is one of those positions where maybe it's not going to affect him right now, but in the far future, he could be seeing the pain of this. Bishop c4, that's a very nice move. Nice move. He has 3 pieces covering d5. And I wanted to play knight d5, but if knight d5 takes, he wins the d pawn. And his bishop is attacking my pawn. So let me just play. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try. I like the idea of bishop to c5. I'm going to try to play a position where it's opposite colored bishops. And I think my bishop is going to be better than his. And how opposite colored bishops work is the player with the more active bishop, the player who has the attacking bishop, is playing with an extra piece. So I'm going to try to ensure that my bishop is more active than his. All right, let me start with f6. f6 weakens the e6 square though, but I don't think bishop e6 check gives him anything. I'm just going to play king to b8. Whew. Pawn b4. Nice little trick. Nice little trick. Because if I take on b4 bishop check, I have to move and I lose this. But what if I play bishop to d4 here? Is he going to play c3? Because I'm going to take. I'm definitely going to take then. So let's put the bishop on d4. Eventually, I think my bishop is going to be forced back to b6. But for now, it's keeping the rooks on the board. If he checks now, I'm just going to move. Pawn c3, I don't think I am afraid of pawn c3. Like if he plays c3, it looks like a free pawn. All right, pawn to b5. Guy's being very creative. He's trying to start his attack. All right, if I takes, bishop takes, and he's good. And then if I play pawn c5, it makes his bishop better. That was a nice move. All right, I think I'm going to take. Because, his bishop is a bit better if it's on the e6 square, not the b5 square. Who is attacking who here? Not really sure. But at least my rook now gets access to the g8 square. I don't know, I'm trying to double up on the file or something. Maybe even if I'm able to go queen c6 and trade the queens and then double up on the file, then I could win the g pawn. But for now, it just seems hard to win that pawn. Pawn c3, that's a very scary move because I'm not going to take with the queen due to rook c1, and I'm not going to take with the bishop because rook c1 and then everything is going to be pinned. Okay, rook up, isn't that a pawn? No, because if I takes, there's rook takes. There is a6, but the bishop goes back. I guess he wants to go rook b3. Nah, maybe pawn c3. Or he wants to double up his rooks on the d file. All right, let's go rook g7. I'm trying to double up my rooks on the d file. If it comes to the test, maybe I'm going to sacrifice both of my rooks for the queen. If it works, like with some calculations, obviously. Pawn c3, okay. Oh, but the thing is, now once I pull my bishop back, and then he takes and I take, there's no doubling up happening here anymore. So it's just going to be one of those end games where I'm going to have to try to grind out the win. Let's go with queen takes. There's queen g8, but his queen is already guarding the g pawn. Luckily, there's no rook to d1, but I'm assuming he's going to play a move that guards the d1 square. Okay, that was just a check. Wasn't expecting that move. I could move my king out the way. I could block with the rook. Blocking with the rook, he's still going to check here. Then move the king out the way. Yeah, but I mean, that's fine, all right? Let's do it. That's fine. Check, move the king out the way. Now I should be safe. Queen e1 though. Who wants an opposite colored bishop endgame? Nobody likes an opposite colored bishop endgame. Okay, now that I'm thinking about it, if we go into the opposite colored bishop endgame, for example, if he plays queen e1 and I take bishop takes, I could even play h4. Okay, this guy wants to draw. Let's calculate. First of all, that's a pawn. So if takes, bishop takes. If I play immediate rook takes, queen takes, bishop takes, puts his rook on the file, bishop to b6. And then the plan is to attack his f pawn. It's going to be hard, but that is a pawn. Nope, let's just take the pawn. The bishop guards it. Maybe he think, because maybe he could still take stakes bishop e1. But once I play h4, like one thing that you guys need to keep in mind is if you're playing against a light squared bishops, you need your pawns on dark squares. I was not expecting him to keep the queens on the board. I was not expecting him to keep the queens on the board. Okay, that looks like a loose bishop. Let's just play a6, kick the bishop. And at least it's easier for me to play king a7, worst case scenario. But I'm trying to set up some tactics now, maybe on his f2 pawn, because this is definitely my target. Okay, bishop a4. Let's apply as much pressure to his bishop as possible and his f2 pawn. So queen d4 hits the bishop, apply pressure to f2. Anytime he check, I'm just going to move my king. I think black has a more active position, like he's not able to use his rook. King up, maybe he thinks he's winning a pawn, but if he takes my pawn, he loses the bishop. If he moves the bishop, then I'm able to play pawn e4. Okay, I think I can say black is winning here, but it's not obvious. I'm just not seeing what white has. Remember what I tell you guys about opposite colored bishops? The opposite colored bishop in the end game, the possibility of the game being a draw, high, high. But in the middle game, it's all about who has the attacking position. So he moves his king off the diagonal. Now I'm trying to play f3. Yep, let's play f3. And if he plays g3, I play e3. Rook to e1. I wasn't expecting that. That's a pawn though, bro. Yeah, this has to be a pawn. And if rook d1 is not possible, and I'm going to be threatening checkmate. That's called a drawback mistake, bro. Let's just take the free pawn. Now he's just going to be mated on the next move. Unless he plays queen g1 or queen g7 or anything to just protect this pawn. Okay, so he guarded the pawn. How do we mate? Bishop to d5 is an idea. Okay, let me start by playing rook to d3, hit the rook. The rook is not able to move away from guarding the background because if the rook moves away from guarding the background, which was a drawback blunder, that's just going to be a checkmate. More Black Lion against 1900 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1900. Let's play some more Black Lion defense. Okay, let's hit the pawn. Very similar to the Pirk. Very, very similar to the Pirk, but it's not the Pirk. Or maybe you could say it's a version of the Pirk called the Black Lion, but I've never heard about that. Okay, knight c3. Let's play pawn c6. Just trying to get the typical setup. Queen c7, pawn e5. I like to delay knight d7 for a while, but let's see if we're going to play it here. So pawn to d4, we go queen c7, followed by pawn e5. There are some cases where we play pawn e5 and allow them to take and prevent us from castling, but I don't know a lot about that line. So pawn h3, let's play e5. If he takes, I takes, and then I'm fine. Okay, he took. Let's just take back. And in a lot of these scenarios, we're now able to go bishop to b4, pin the knight to the king, and then automatically we're threatening some tactic to win a pawn. So bishop to d3 is good though. Like once the bishop goes to d3, putting the bishop on b4 doesn't really comes with a threat. So let's just play h6 here, preventing anything from going to g5. But most importantly, we're trying to start the Black Lion attack. And if I could just put my bishop on the e6 square while doing it, then that would be good. So the opponent got his king out the center of the board. let's first play bishop e6. And the plan from here is simple: knight d7, pawn g5, bishop e7, knight f8, knight g6, some pawn g4 ideas, knight f4 ideas. The rook could come to d8, and that's how we're going to be playing the game from there. So immediate knight back to h2 was played. I'm assuming he wants to play knight to g4. It's not a bad move, but I'm not sure why he's going for all of that this early. Let's just continue with our development here. Maybe I could have played, yeah, I was thinking about playing g5 to prevent f4, but I'm not afraid of f4 though. Like once I take, his pawn on e4 is isolated. I mean, bishop takes is a move. I like the idea of check, king move, take, because the pawn is unprotected and the king is exposed. If I take though, rook b1, I win a piece. I hit the knight. Where does he put the knight? Knight a5, there's queen b4, or even queen a3. I think I'm just winning a pawn here. Queen b3, king move, I take. There's queen to b2, but then I just move my queen away. And then I could even castle on the queen side here. Like we're taking that pawn. He's forcing me to move the queen anyways. And playing pawn to f4, as you could see, exposes his king. So now we take the free pawn. Rook to b1 is usually the idea to win back this pawn, but the knight is just unprotected, so he can't do that now. Okay, very interesting move. I mean, he attacks my knight, I attack his knight. I take his knight, he takes my knight. At the end of everything, though, I take a pawn. That's another pawn, bro. And how is he gonna attack my queen? I mean, bishop back to d2, but my queen is safe. That's another pawn, bro. If he takes, knight takes, and I'm safe. Worst case scenario, we're just running to the queen side. But I don't need to do all of that. Like, there's bishop e7 and castle here. Well, knight g4. The guy's down by 2 pawns. He's willingly trying to trade pieces off the board. So that cannot be good for him. I'm just trying to finish my development here. I like the idea of playing bishop c5 as well. Gets a lot of control over this diagonal. I'm assuming he's going to want to put his bishop on e5. So for example, bishop c5, there's queen to e2, bishop to d4 hits the rook. And then once the rook move, we could castle in that scenario. Yo, bishop c5 is also very strong because I'm also thinking of playing g5 and then once the bishop move, h5, and then open up this line pointing towards the king. And the reason why I want to play g5 first is if I play immediate h5, then he's going to be able to play g5 and then I can't open up the file. Queen 2, we were expecting that. Bishop e5 is now the clear idea. Pawn h5, there's pawn g4. Bishop e5. Yeah, this is what we planned. Bishop e5 prevents bishop to, well, putting the bishop here prevents his bishop from going there. And I apply pressure to his rook. So I'm definitely expecting rook here to attack the unprotected pawn. And then at that point, I'm thinking g5. And then once the bishop move, we play h5. And if he takes the queen, we take, and that's mate. So let's go with that idea. So, okay, I don't want to rush this. g5 hits the bishop. Where does he put the bishop? The most natural square is d2. I mean, it also gains tempo on my queen. This is also a tactic called the missing f7 pawn. It's the f2 pawn, but in the book that I read about it, it's called the missing f7 pawn. And the whole idea is once the king is in the corner and your bishop covers all of this diagonal, the whole idea is just to open the file. Once we're able to open the file, then it becomes a checkmate. So this is my pattern recognition working. Bishop moves to d6. Maybe he's trying to trap my queen. But okay, h5 I like, but he's able to take. So h5 takes, and then I play g5. There's no way to guard the pawn, so he has to push a pawn. I check, king up. There's also castle, but if I castle here, bishop backhand, my queen is trapped. So I'm gonna go with the most forcing variation. If he chooses to trap my queen now, then he's mated. What? Why did he take on b? He took on b7 immediately once I play h5. Oh, it's not mate. It's a check. It's actually not mate. He's able to block with the bishop. But this cannot be good, bro. This cannot be good. The bishop is now pinned. What do we do when a piece is pinned, though? We PP on the PP. So pawn g3 is already threatening mate. Like, there's actually rook takes f7 here, which is very strong. And I'm not able to take, and queen takes is coming. But me playing g3, no. Immediately threaten a checkmate. How does he prevent that? I'm not seeing it. This is PP on the PP. It's GG's now. How is he gonna stop the mate? Let alone guard the bishop and stop the mate. And he has no way to check my king. Maybe he could sack his queen, but that's not gonna lead anywhere. So you guys just witness a discovered attack, and then after the discovered attack, it goes into PP on the PP. So could be something that way would drop in the book. Who knows? Okay, so he sacked the queen. Doesn't work though, bro. That's just a queen. Like check, king over. There's no more checks. I mean, maybe he's just gonna resign here or something. Yo, look at this guy. Oh, how creative is this? If I take the free bishop, then rook to h8 is gonna be made. What if I just go queen e1 and sack the queen? And then after the rook takes, and then I play rook h5. How is he gonna possibly prevent a checkmate? Like literally none of his pieces can't move. So bishop g5 was nice. But now I'm able to hit him with queen e1. Now his rook is pinned. I'm just giving the guy a queen, which he could take it if he want, but rook takes is just gonna be a force mate. This nice move. He took. Now we take. I could pre-move rook takes h2. I mean, maybe he's gonna play some weird check to sack his rook, but you guys are witnessing the missing f7 pawn. This is the tactic that you guys are witnessing. It's over now. And he resigns. More Black Lion against 2,000 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 2,000. Let's end the Black Lion with a bang. Pawn d4. Let's go knight f6. Hit the unprotected pawn. Bishop d3, now we go c6. This is how I like to play it. And eventually I put my queen on c7. I put my pawn on e5. He decides to castle his king very quickly. That's a good sign. That's a very good sign. Let's play immediate pawn to e5. And we're going to start with our lion attack. Let's take back. Pawn h3, that's also another good sign. He's trying to prevent my bishop from going to g4. I'm gonna play h6, very innocent move, but he doesn't know that I'm trying to play g5. So knight c3, normal move. The knight is also not able to move forward, and that's the importance of having this pawn on c6. Now I'm gonna play pawn g5. Now he sees exactly what's about to hit him. Pawn g4 is coming, and the plan is simple. Get the knight, so he plays knight h2. Pawn g4, if he takes, then rook to g1. This is how I usually do it. Pawn f3 is an idea. I'm able to check. King goes over to h1. Yeah, I think he's trying to play knight g4 next. But you know what? Let's just develop the pieces normally here. Let's just continue with the regular thematic idea. If knight g4, I'm just going to take. So he plays bishop to e3, and he basically don't want me to be putting my bishop on c5. Let's just continue with the regular move, bishop e7, and I'm just going to try to get my knight to the f4 square. So queen d2, knight f8. This is the Black Lion attack, guys. Knight goes to g4. So he plays pawn f3. We play knight to g6, and eventually the knight is going to the f4 square. There's also bishop e6, which is a very nice diagonal for the bishop, also preventing the opponent's bishop from going to c4. Knight to g4. If I takes, pawn takes, that's a nice open file, so we're not going to do that. So instead, I'm going to just continue with the plan and play knight f4. Now, if the bishop takes, I take, and then I have a very strong open file for my rook. Still going to go bishop e6, and I'm thinking about castling my king. So rook to d1, we go bishop e6, and if I'm able to castle on the queen side, I'm just not seeing his attack. One thing I'm seeing though, there's him taking this free pawn, which could be very risky. Because if I play b6 to trap his bishop, bishop to a6, and I lose the game. So maybe we can't castle just yet. I'm thinking of h5 though, trying to force the knight to commit to something. And if he takes, bishop takes, then we continue with the attack on his king. Queen f2. I think he's bracing himself for me to castle. And he's also trying to take a free pawn on a7. So that looks a bit scary. How do we continue with our attack here? Pawn h5, knight takes, bishop takes. He takes a free pawn, and then I'm not seeing what I have there. So let me just go ahead and play b6 just to not blunder anything here. And it's also going to make castling just a bit more easier for me. Pawn b3. Is he trying to put the bishop here? If I castle, he checks, king over. All right, let's play h5 now. and try to continue with the attack. I'm not in any rush to castle, but I eventually need to get my king out the center of the board. Pawn to h3 will never be a threat. I'm trying to sacrifice on h3, but the moment I take on h3, he's not going to take and allow this fork. If I take on h3 with the bishop, he's going to take on f4 first, and that's an in-between move. The only way I could make this work is if I'm able to play e takes, and then once he takes, I pin. Bishop takes c4 cannot be good. Now he's just doubling up his pawns for no reason. Okay, and if you push, I'm going to push. I don't necessarily want to push because then it opens up this file on my knight. How do we continue here? Let me go with queen here. The plan is to start targeting those weak pawns. What would be so cool is I can actually castle on the king side. My king is safe on the king side because he can't play g3 because of this fork. Maybe he could play h4, but then I'm just going to take the free pawn. So my king is surprisingly safe. I'm not going to try to do some fancy attack to win this now. I'm just going to try to play it very positionally. There's also some little tactic though. Queen b4 hits the knight, and then I can, if he guards it with the queen, I could try to sack the queen and then fork him on e2. That would be a nice tactic to make the book. So rook d2, and already he has two unprotected pieces. If someone has two unprotected pieces in their position, isn't this like a guaranteed fork? Unprotected knight, unprotected pawn. Simply move the queen to b4, and we're attacking both of them. So he has to save the knight. He also has no checks on my king. Okay, knight went back, and then that's just a pawn. And if he takes, I take. Anything he takes with, I take with the g pawn, and I'm fine. So let's just grab the free pawn. And already we're ahead by a pawn with a very nice position and a king in the center of the board. And this pawn is under attack. Whoa. Whoa. F5 is going to be such a nice score for a knight. I'm ahead by a pawn, but at what cause? All right. I think my bishop belongs on this diagonal. He's going to play knight f5, and it's going to be hard. Now I'm not even sure if I want to castle on the king side anymore. On h4. Let me play h4 before it's too late. And if he takes, I take. Yo, this knight is just so strong. All of a sudden, it's crazy. One thing that you guys need to keep in mind when it comes to castling is not castling the king. It doesn't only say, hey, your king is not safe. You're also playing the game without two rooks. So you have to keep that in mind. All right, so he's doubling up his rooks on the d file. Okay, I don't think my knight belongs on f4 anymore. In fact, I need to castle ASAP. So let me just play bishop b4 to hit the rook. But this is actually me trying to castle. And if I had castled before, he would have played knight takes e7. So if he plays rook d7, I just get my king out the center of the board. It's going to be weird though, because he's the one with the attack now. I don't have the attack here. All right, his rook is on my 7th rank. Let's get the king out the center of the board. It's a very risky looking castle. It's a very risky looking castle. But pawn g3 will never work. Maybe he has to take first, but then I take, and my king looks safe in that position. So let's see. How am I going to get my rooks in the game when he has complete control over the d file? I have no clue. King h1. Think he wants to play g3, but he doesn't want me to fork. And that's a very nice idea. What I want to do is get as many pieces off the board as quickly as I possibly can. So let's start with bishop c5. If I'm only ahead by a pawn, but that's a lot, and I don't want to be attacked here. So if he takes, I'm going to go queen takes. And if he wants to trade the queen and be like, hey, bro, I'm doubling up your pawn, hey, knock yourself out. If you know that you're going to be under attack, there's pawns pushed up on the side that your king is on, you have to try to get the pieces off the board. Ooh, queen d2. Guy says, yo, I'm not trading. And that's not bad that he's doing. I think eventually I may need my knight on the e6 square. Guards g5 allows me to play rook to d8 and then just trade some pieces off the board. Yeah, let's do that. Rook to d8 is now the next move. If he takes, he loses the queen. And if he takes, then I get control over the d file. Rook to d8 is actually a very nice move, which helps me to get my rooks in the game because he had all his pieces in the game and none of my rooks weren't doing anything. On c3, well, I think I don't want to go knight d4, bro. I'm trying to trade. I'm just trying to trade. So he plays c3 thinking I'm trying to put my knight on d4. But that's not what I'm trying to do. If he takes, I hit the queen, win this pawn. And then my plan is to take the rook. And then if the rook takes, I play rook to d8. And if he moves the queen out of the way, I take his rook and I win the game. All right, so queen moved out of the way. I am just trying to trade here. Takes, rook over. What if he just grabs a pawn? If he grabs the pawn, I could try to get some little counter attack, but I'm not seeing any counter attack. I don't want to give him back the pawn. That's the thing. Let's do it still. Let's take, rook takes, swing. And if he decides to take the pawn on a7, I jump the knight back to f4. And then I'm going to try to get my rook on the back rank, maybe get my queen on f2, attack this pawn, and he's going to be the one under attack. But he didn't do none of that. And he plays queen d7. Nice move. Now if I takes, queen takes, and then thinking I'm winning a pawn, my back rank is just going to be too weak. I mean, let's say he checks, I block. Nah, that's just too risky. That's too risky. Can't allow that. All right, let's play queen all the way back. So that way, if he takes my rook, I take back, and then I could trade the queens off the board. If I trade the queens off the board, I'm winning because I have the extra pawn. I'm looking into takes, queen d8, check. Ooh, we blundered. We got him. Ay, 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 we got him. His queen is unprotected. Tactic like this would definitely deserve to go in the book. Look at this. Check. How do we continue? Because the queen is unprotected and the rook is on the same line as the queen, we're able to simply take the knight. I mean, he's not able to take because the queen guards g5. If he takes my queen, we take his queen. And if he takes the rook, we just play queen takes and we win the game. Very nice. So he took, we take, and just like that, we're ahead by a whole entire piece, which is crazy. His time is also ticking down from here, but very simple plan. We're going to go queen d3, queen e3, queen g2. And it doesn't matter what he plays, we're going to be playing these moves because now he's not able to prevent any checkmate. So I'm the opponent resigns. Please subscribe.